Okay. Morning, everyone. Welcome back to Budget 2020. Just a reminder that our procedural bylaw is temporarily waived as the motion from yesterday is still in place. And Mr. Heineman or Ms. Van Kijnpema, I see you're making a move to the podium. You're going to start us off this morning. Apologies for the 9-minute delay. We had a small technical difficulty that we've worked through, and now we're just going to push through until coffee time.
Hey, good morning, Mayor Janung, members of council. We are going to give you some information on capital, because I know yesterday we had a discussion and I had sort of waded into some things with information you hadn't received yet, which was contained in this presentation regarding capital. This won't take very long. It's just so that we do have that full picture before we continue on to other topics. So the agenda recap of operating, finish the discussion, which I think we don't need to do right now. We'll postpone that. We'll move into the capital introduction, which includes 10-year financial plan update, capital budget review and discussion, and then we'll have a service fee. Subsequent to yesterday, this was prepared over the weekend. So to modify that, we will do not the recap. Won't finish the operating discussion. I'll do a capital introduction, 10-year financial plan. Then we'll have a break. Then we'll talk about Spray Lakes Rec Center. And then we'll move into a budget review and discussion of the different projects if council has any questions or wants to debate particular projects. And then once we're done that, we'll move into the service fee review and discussion, which Ms. Gallen will be the one to present that for council's information. And then after that, the floor is back open again for figuring out where we land so that administration has a recommendation that we can make sure that the budget book that we bring to the December 14th council meeting reflects your direction coming out of these discussions.
I can't believe we're talking about December already.
It's not that far away.
I know.
All right.
Sounds good.
So recap, we had lots of stuff, we have a parking lot, we have more to do. There's your recap.
Wow.
Look at that. All right, capital introduction. So we have $26.6 million in projects in 2021, 13.2 in 22 and 22.7 in 23. We have a number of transportation projects, which makes sense because that's sort of where council's focus is for this year. We've made a lot of great progress on being able to get the province on board with us in order to move forward with the Centre Avenue and 1A highway improvements. But we also have James Walker Trail connections. We have the extension for Highway 22. We have to do a utility relocate. There's Quigley Drive updates, Phase 2, Horse Creek CPR vehicle crossing, as well as work on the upgrade for Township 262. That's not the only thing we're doing, though. It's not all about transportation. We're also building a transit hub and innovation center. So just a reminder, that was approved just recently at your October council meeting. Protective Services building was approved in 2020. The construction will start in 21. We have utility servicing and planning for the development of Horse Creek Sports Park. That came up yesterday. We have some wastewater pipeline twinning and the River Heights Water Reservoir. That also came up for discussion. So why have some of the amounts changed? That was one of the questions that came up from council. So in the 2020 budget for 2020 through 2022 and the 10-year financial plan, when that was prepared for the 2020 budget presentation, a number of projects did not include any contingency amounts. Also, frequently we have very high-level cost estimates for projects, and as you do work and you get down to a point of detailed design, your estimates get tighter and tighter, and therefore your numbers change. So that's why project amounts change. We could have an amount in a budget for 2023, but by the time we get to that project, you will see that the price is different. We can always keep our fingers crossed and hope that the price has gone down. However, that doesn't happen very often, I'm sorry to say. And just to reassure council that in this 21 through 23 budget, it does include contingencies for all projects. So some other information that would be interesting for you to have. Tax support for capital projects, so that was another question that came up. So we don't collect tax dollars as the direct funding source for any of our capital projects. How that works is we take the taxes to contribute to reserves, and then some projects are funded partially or fully from those reserve contributions. So tax support of capital projects is not a direct line. It's an indirect line via reserve contributions and then draws. Given our decreased reserve contributions, senior managers have determined when we put together the draft budget that we should delay some of the capital projects. So we got in, there was a bit of that confusion when we were going through council priorities. There are some of those projects that were on there that were in the council's priorities, and we had that document put together. But as we were doing our budget review, we determined if we're going to lower reserve contributions, then we really need to take a look, not just from a financial capacity, but also a staffing workload capacity. I think we tend to have rose-colored glasses when we decide how many projects we can actually accomplish in a year, and that's all coming from a place of really good intent. And I think all our staff is very interested in working hard and delivering, and they think they can. I'm guilty of that too. I think, oh, it'll only take me half an hour to put this presentation together, and next thing you know, it's taken me all day. So I think that's the same thing here. So we tried to sort of take those glasses off a little bit and try and push off some of our capital projects. When we talk about and I believe this was your question, Councillor McFadden, when the budget book where it talks about 15% of taxes as the reserve contribution goal for the infrastructure, or for reserve contributions referred to on page 2 of the budget book, that was a recommendation of the previous CAO. It's not something that's sort of an industry standard or best practices. And in actual fact, I would recommend that it's not sufficient, considering that simply our annual amortization is $11 million. And if you look at page 2, the contributions to reserve are nowhere close to that. And when you think about amortization, that's just historical cost of assets. That doesn't include the ones you're going to be adding on. It doesn't include the replacement cost. Something that in 1996 cost you $2 million, I guarantee you will not be able to get that same asset for $2 million. But that's the amount of amortization we're recognizing each year. So just to give you some idea, there are some experts in the field who are saying you should be at least putting away your annual amortization. And others would argue no, because you're not necessarily having to fund all of your projects from reserve contributions. There's probably grant opportunities or debt opportunities. So as we work our way through financial policies, which is one of the goals I have over the coming years, that will be putting together a reserve policy, and then that way we'll have council's philosophy as to what is our targets, what is our goals, how is it we're going to be contributing to that. But that's work for the future, but I thought I'd just try and answer that question for you about the 15%. So what's some other information? This is another question that came up, and I think we answered this yesterday, the questions about the tri-site plan on page 10. So the dollars aren't in 2021 budget. I believe, Councillor Flowers, this was a question that you had. The Transit Hub Innovation Centre, the dollars are in 2020. At-grade pedestrian crossing, again, was approved in 2020, construction in 21. So that's why you're not seeing those dollars in this particular budget. So 10-year financial plan. So
Before you get into that, Alex had a question here. Councillor Reid.
So I just want to go back, if I could, to the question about reserve. So I'm trying to, so are we not putting any money in reserve of this?
Oh, yes, we are. Yeah.
Okay, where is that?
So if you look on page 2, at the bottom of page 2, there's tax-supported reserve transfers of $3.4 million in 21, 3.6 in 22, and 4.3 in 23.
And okay, thanks for that. And then how would the proposed policy that you're conceiving be any different than what's here?
I haven't got to that point.
I haven't thought that through. And then the other question I had related to reserve was, are you going to speak at some point about debt?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions at this point? Okay. So the 10-year financial plan. I took the plan that we had prepared for last year's budget go-round and updated it for adding in contingencies, updated project numbers, as well as updated projects and timing of projects, and recrunched the numbers. So over the next 10 years, we're planning $205 million worth of projects. Big number. And of the 205, 85 million is over the next 3 years. Just to let you know, that plan will continue to evolve as projects are added, amended, costed, strategized for. So whenever I prepare the 10-year financial plan, that's as at a point in time. It's a snapshot of the information we have at that time. So it's a living, changing, evolving document. So this comes out of your budget book. So transportation projects. So as you can see, we have a number of those over that the 10-year horizon. It's kind of interesting to see that actually almost exactly half of the 10 years of transportation projects will happen in the first 3 years. Then I took the bottom half of the same chart and to show all the non-transportation projects. So if you look at that, you can see that we predominantly are focusing over the next 3 years on transportation projects, because half of that total is transportation. But you go to the other ones, and of the total, 205, 85 is over the next 3 years for non-transportation. Although I do believe we do have a number of projects, so it isn't strictly transportation focused. One of the big ones obviously is the Protective Services Building, but we are doing work towards the Horse Creek Sports Park and lots of other things, lots of utility projects. So you can see that we aren't just focusing in one area, that there are lots of other projects on deck for the town. So, summary. Let's break it down by year. What's the capital expenditure by year? So if you look at it, we have a big lump in 2021, and that's because Protective Services Building, the Transit Hub and Innovation Center, and we have the Highway 1A and Center Avenue improvements. So there are a number of projects in 2021, and that makes sense. You know, that's the year that's closest to us, so that's the year where we've got most of our stuff sort of planned quite firmly. And then as you go out, you can see there's ups and downs. So what causes the little bit of a bump in 2023 is the upgrade to Township 262 and the Horse Creek Sports Park servicing. The jump in 2024 is the James Walker Trail connections. There's a solar project in there and the Horse Creek Crossing Phase 2 development. And then in 2026, there's a bit of a blip, and that's the start of the wastewater pipeline twinning. So I thought it might help sort of to put it in graphs, and you can see how we don't do an even amount, at least in dollars, of capital projects each year, that it changes as we go. So debt, here's the question for Councillor Reid. So the debt limit that's been used, so there's 3 lines here. The blue line is the percentage of the Cochrane debt limit. So that's council set debt limit. I believe it's 80% of what the Municipal Government Act permits us to borrow up to, which is that orange line. The gray line at the bottom is the percentage of the debt that we will be taking that's supported by taxes. So you say, well, wait a minute, how can we have debt at those higher levels, but only the gray level is supported by tax? A lot of it is off-site levy debt. So lots of time we have to put into infrastructure for growth before we've collected the off-site levies to pay for it. So therefore, we take debt, and then the off-site levies that we collect make those debt payments. The other thing that's in here is the Protective Services Building. We will be collecting rent, and that rent will be going to help offset the debt for the Protective Services Building. And we'll get more information on that in the new year when we bring the borrowing bylaw to council for consideration on that. So I just wanted to point out that, yes, we have ups and downs in the tax-supported debt, but if you look at 2021, we're at 6% of our debt limit, and in 2030, we're at 9%. So it's not an alarming amount of debt that we're taking, that we're supporting through our taxes. The other thing to think about debt, especially now and and again, I'm going to show my age. When we bought one of our first houses, it was in the 80s. And we had a mobile home and it wasn't fixed to the ground. So our mortgage rate was 16% on our mortgage. And that was not too shocking because that was kind of the going rate then. Now, the town can borrow for 15 years at 1.7%. And that's set for the whole 15 years, not the 5 years that I could get my mortgage for. So when you think about that cost, you can, I know it's hard to find, but investments, you can get investments that pay more than 1.7%. So you can use debt strategically. One, if you can invest your money at an interest rate higher than you would pay on the debt, that would make financial sense. The other thing to think about is when you have a project that really is going to be for the benefit of future users, and an example is the Protective Services building. That will be the building that houses the protective services for the people of the future. It would make sense that the people of the future are the ones paying for the cost of that building, and how we shift that burden on to the users of the asset that we're building is to use debt. If you use reserves, that's the past taxpayers paying for that. If you use tax dollars, that's today's taxpayers paying for that. If you use debt, you spread it out and you're charging the users who will benefit from the thing that you're taking debt for. Do I recommend that you take debt in the 1980s when it was at 16%? Nope. But given the low interest rates right now, we do have opportunities to use debt strategically, and I feel that this budget does that. So what's the type of debt that we have? So just another way of giving you a snapshot of what things look like. So I stacked up our debt so we can see the level in dollars of the debt. It has the highest at 2024 and then goes down, which makes sense because we're doing a number of projects in that first set of years. If you look at the graph, the bottom is our off-site levy debt. So you can see that that is changing and growing and then starts to go down. Our tax debt is reflective of that line that we saw where it was at 6% at the beginning and 9% at the end. There's a little bit of growth in the middle. That's reflected by the yellow. And then the green is the user fee, and that's the Protective Services building. So as you can see, it's not out of control, it's not out of hand. We are using our debt strategically, but that kind of gives you a little bit of a breakdown in a different way. So we have debt we can use for capital projects. We have reserves, which is our savings accounts. So I talked about this a little bit yesterday. Given that we have $205 million of capital projects planned over the next 10 years, we were cognizant that 2021 was not a year to be increasing reserve contributions, and we actually decreased it, and we actually took more out of reserves than we have historically. All of that combined shows that red part of each of the bars is our capital reserves, and you can see by 2029, we're down into the negative. By the time we get to 2030, we're at minus $7 million in capital reserves. Our operating reserves stay pretty consistent. We don't have a lot of demands. That's sort of more of our unexpected reserves. What if something comes up that we didn't plan for and we need to pay for that? That's what the operating reserves are for. So there's not a lot of operating type draws from reserves planned over 10 years. The green is the offsite levy. It stays pretty consistent year from year, which makes sense, which tells us that we're collecting enough offsite levies to pay off the debt, because that's factored into the projected reserve balances. And then the CRL is the Community Revitalization Levy. We put the money into reserve, and it's for specific projects. So just wanted to point out that despite the fact that we're putting money away in the infrastructure gap reserve, and starting in 22, we increased that amount, the contribution. And for the other contributions, we have the different departments contributing to vehicle replacement reserves and facility reserves, and we have small increases for those each year. We're still not going to have enough capital dollars to do all of the things that are in the 10-year plan. So we have a couple of choices. We can change what we're doing in the 10-year plan. We can find a cheaper way of doing it, or we can find a different way of funding it. Or, better yet, we can put some more money away into reserves, and I'm not saying 21 is the year to do that. I'm just saying I wanted you to have this information as we're having our discussions, and that's why I wanted to provide this introduction to you this morning. So, another source of funding is reoccurring grants. So, where are we going to be at based on our grants? So just so that you know, all of our grants are fully used. So there's 3 grants I'm going to talk about this morning. One is the gas tax fund. So it's assumed to continue at 3% increase per year. So I took the normal 2020 allocation of $1.6 million and used a 3% increase going out for each of the 10 years. With the Municipal Sustainability Initiative, or MSI grant, our 2020 allocation was $4.6 million. I assumed that 21 through 23 would remain the same, and that assuming from 24 onward, it would be at the 2019 level of $2.3 million. The reason for that assumption is that program ends in 22. The province has said they might have something to replace it. We're anticipating that they probably will. Will it be at the same level? Probably not. When we get to this time next year, we're hoping we'll have more information on the MSI grant and the anticipated levels that it will be at. So we may need to make some adjustments again based on new information for the grant information. So that was one of the questions. Yeah, Mayor Janelle?
Yeah, the MSI, and that was one of the things I wanted to focus on. I think Councillor McFadden had some similar questions. The letter we just received from Minister Allard, Municipal Affairs, was somewhat of a warning in my view, reading between the lines.
Yeah.
Discussions with other mayors, there's an assumption from most other communities that 2021 is going to be way less than 2020.
Okay.
Talked, and this is speculation only. So my question is, if we were to receive 15 or 20% less from the province, what effect would that have on this budget?
It wouldn't have really an effect in 21. The reason being is that we do have some carryover money available from 2020 that was not fully allocated in 2020, which you're allowed to do. So we have some nimbleness in 21. And then if 22 is going to be a reoccurring theme of that, then we would have to make adjustments as to how we fund those projects and the 10-year plan when we do this whole process again next year.
So 2022, 2023 projects that are, where can we find the MSI allotments? When in the budget, it would just say grants or other, right? It
would say grants, and then it would depend on which grants. So I can give you specifically that information this afternoon?
I guess my question is, so is there projects in 2022 or 23 that would be affected by the MSI allotment?
So the MSI allotment
So if that goes down the 20% and we have 600,000 less or $1 million less, are some of the projects that we're looking at in the close window at risk?
So MSI is very malleable. You can apply it to many different projects. So for me to say that this particular project, which is currently funded by MSI, is at risk, that's not really correct, because it means that we would have to find a different funding source. We could take the MSI and apply it to a different project. So the parameters of applying MSI are very broad. So I can provide you with the list of projects that are specific to MSI right now, and then we can find, but I encourage you to not assume that that project would be killed if the MSI dollars doesn't come through.
Okay, the caution that I'm trying to portray is that likely, in my opinion, that grant is going to be substantially less in 2021. I look forward to that information this afternoon.
I will get you that. All right. So the other one, it's part of the MSI, it's a basic municipal transportation grant. So our 2020 allocation was $1.7 million, and we're assuming that it continues at the same amount throughout the 10-year period. So I'm not increasing that grant, just like I didn't increase the MSI. And that's all I got to say about
Oh, I
that.
could have waited one slide.
Yeah. So-
Anybody have any questions in regards to the overview of debt,
I know,
reserves, and
I just put a dark cloud over everybody's head.
Councillor Federico?
I just wanted to make the comment to say thank you for putting contingency in all the projects in this budget moving forward so that we don't have any more surprises. So thank you for that, making sure that it became a priority.
Well, we might still have surprises, but hopefully not so big.
One question I have. So you're forecasting a capital reserve, depletion over the next 10 years. The operating reserves, can you give us a bit of a synopsis on where those are allocated and how and if we could transfer if we had to?
So the only allocation I have out of the operating reserves is in 2021 to help offset the cost of Spray Lakes. I have money coming out, I have $500,000 coming out of the operating reserves to help fund that in 21.
So we can't transfer from operating to capital?
Council can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
The only ones you cannot touch are the off-site levy reserves and ones collected for specifically municipal reserve, dollars in lieu of municipal reserve. So those are sort of legislated reserves. Other than that, what council's done as far as the allocations of where the reserve dollars go, that's up to council. I had a person that I used to work with who talked about, yeah, well, reserve dollars, it's all fungible. Meaning that you can move it. Just because it says it's this particular reserve doesn't mean that that's the only thing it can be used for.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Looks like we're
All right. Thank you. Much shorter today.
still early.
Yes, just
Oh,
wait.
there's one.
Okay.
Councillor McFadden.
Caffeine's starting to kick in, I apologize. You'd highlighted, sorry, I think you'd said 3 grants that we primarily rely on. So it was the gas tax and the MSI. What was the third one? Oh, the basic,
It's BMTG is the acronym. And it comes at the same, like it comes and it's listed when we get our allocation for MSI. It has MSI allocation, BMTG, and then total. But what I have historically done, it's historically been geared towards basic transportation, so road rehab, patching, paving type projects. And so we've tried really hard to make sure that we continue to use that grant in that way, although it's no longer that same stipulation.
and so how does the government fund that one? Like the gas tax, that's self-evident.
The gas tax comes from the federal government,
Oh, okay.
and then it's put through the province, and the province puts parameters around it and sends it out to municipalities, but the dollars come from the federal government. The MSI and the BMTG, those are provincially funded grants.
All right. And that the BMTG is held steady?
It's gone up, but not by leaps and bounds. I think we were at just shy of 1.7, and then it's 1.756. So what I've done is I've held it steady over the next 10 years at the 2020 allocation.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Don't see any more lights.
All right, thank you.
So can you remind me what's next in the agenda?
Spray Lakes. Do you want to take a break?
You guys, what do you want to do? Next thing up would be circle back onto our parking lot items, which I think we're at the rec center and the MOST grant.
And I've just sent some documentation to everybody about the rec center for their information.
You just sent it? Okay.
We're having that information printed, Alex, and it'll be here shortly.
Well, why don't we take a 15-minute break, then we get that printed, and then we'll have some real details to talk about.
calling it the Pool Palace and amongst other things. But I wanted to begin by apologizing to council and the patrons, staff, and the board of Spray Lakes in not obviously doing a good enough job in identifying the needs of Spray Lakes as a facility to town council. Despite sharing the board meeting agenda packages for the last several months and trying to keep council informed, I kind of feel like I've failed. So the document is to kind of address some of the rhetoric that's been kind of going around the community. And I thought that it would be appropriate to kind of speak about the facts that what actually occurred here. Historically, everybody knows that the town literally forced the Spray Lakes Board to manage the pool and the curling rinks. Part of that as a profitable nonprofit organization. And despite the former town council and former administration convincing the public that the new pool and the curling rinks would be profitable or at least break even, anyone who did a little research would discover that there's not a single pool in Western Canada, or in fact probably all of Canada, that makes money or is profitable. So the Spray Lakes Board back then recognized that, and so the former town council and former town administration signed a contract with the Spray Lakes Board, identifying that they would cover all deficits, reasonable deficits. To add injury to insult, the former administration made cost-cutting decisions that have, in hindsight, ballooned the cost. Well, they did it because of the ballooning costs of the construction, but that, coupled with shoddy construction practices, has left the facility, what was to be a new facility, in state-of-the-art kind of shape and a constant state of repair. Having said that, I think the document kind of speaks to the original ask, what is proposed in the budget. The second point addresses the fact that in terms of this facility, the document that Drew is trying to get printed in the second document in the file shows the kind of cost recovery rate and how the Spray Lakes facility compares to other like centers in Alberta. And you can see that, thanks, Drew. You'll be able to see that it does very well. The identification of the operating costs between 2020 and 21, where the unfavorable and the unfavorable revenue is, and where the expenses occurred, is identified. You can see that the Spray Lakes Board or administration has tried to address what the request by the town for budget, and it met, and I think in many ways exceeded that. And then I wanted to drop to the facts. So just, the city of Calgary posted about their YMCA being the biggest YMCA in Canada. Well, the Spray Lakes Centre is actually bigger than that, just to kind of put a context to it. You can see at its height, it has 6,400 paid members, and they're struggling to get back up to the pre-pandemic era. The study speaks for itself. The number of visits speaks for itself. I think one of the questions that kept coming up yesterday was about grants, and you can see they've been very successful in obtaining grants. As a non-profit organization, they have the ability to be able to do that. If the town were to assume responsibility for the center, they wouldn't have that option. That's not to say that I don't think that we should be exploring the transition, but just recognize that there are associated costs. So having said that, I'd like to open it up for questions about the Spray Lakes budget request.
I guess at this point, I would just say, I know that all of our, it's been kind of a lightning rod, this topic, for the past few months. And just as I've been sharing this, these words with the community, let's try throughout this discussion to make it about the dollar number and not about feelings or those, I think with COVID, obviously tempers are a little bit high, and it's unfortunate there's some of the language in this letter, I think, is not doing us favors today. But with that said, let's see if we can keep it on the number and on the budget item instead of on personal attacks, if we can. Councillor Nagel.
Thank you. First thing I want to clarify is that Councillor Reid, you said you feel like you've failed as a board member. I really do not think that is the case. I want to be crystal clear. I think I speak for everybody when I say I think you've done an exceptional job as a board member. You've always taken your role as a board member very seriously. You've brought in tons of information. You've done your best to mediate information between the board and between council, like a 5-star board member job. So do not view yourself as a failure by any means. The only question I still have, which I raised yesterday, and I'm not seeing it here, unless there's something here that I'm, not understanding. I don't understand why the budgetary request would continue to increase like 30% per year after COVID. Because I understand like this year there's huge costs due to COVID as well as huge revenue losses due to COVID. But I think in 2022 and 2023, it shouldn't continue to go up 30% per year.
Right. So I appreciate your confidence and support. I believe, Catherine might be able to help me out with this. I believe what it is, Morgan, is that Catherine has chosen to combine both the operating and capital into one, and the capital expenses are continuing to go up because of the report about the facility and its need for constant repair.
That, I can weigh in on that too. So I don't know the exact number, but operationally, I think they were looking for around 2 million in 2021. I don't think that number changed much in 22 or 23, but Councillor Reid is correct that Morrison Hirschfield, I think, is the company that did a report for the board. It was a third-party engineering firm that looked at the entire facility, highlighted areas that needed to be fixed or rehabilitated, and the life cycle of roof, generators, hydronics, pumps, plants, everything, and then laid that out to the board, and that's what they're basing their ask for in capital. And that's the old arena and the Spray Lakes Family Sawmill Sports Center. Ms. Van Kuypema?
Thank you. When we met with Mayor Janung, Mr. Heineman, and myself, Councillor Reid and a couple of the board members, as well as Mr. Flusky and Ms. Wagner, they had given us information on their budget for 2021 and walked us through the capital stuff. And then we had said, okay, well, there's a 3-year budget that has to be prepared. So it was at that time that they realized that they also needed to prepare for 22 and 23. And so they had put all of their work into making sure the numbers for 2021 were correct and what they were needing for their operating as well as their capital. And then subsequently, they didn't have the time, or I'm not trying not to make it sound negative. It's not negative at all. There was a misunderstanding. They thought they just had to prepare 2021. So for the purposes of providing a request for 22 and 23, they chose to use the same number for operating with the idea, and I know Mr. Flusky has provided us this information. Once we get to the same place next year, they will be doing the same amount of work to crunch it and get it more detailed for 2022. So it was felt that their efforts were best placed focusing on 2021 rather than spending all the effort to really narrow down 22 and 23.
Councillor Nagel, you still have the floor.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like there's still things to be discussed about what's coming up in 2022 and 2023. So from a budgetary standpoint, at this point, I would like to approve their 2021 request and then assume 2022 and 2023 are going to be the same as 2021. And if they want more next year, then they need to come back and justify that extra amount next year to whoever is sitting in this seat 12 months from today. That's my thinking. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nagel. Councillor Federico?
I too wanted to share Councillor Nagel's thoughts. Councillor Reid, I think you've done a great job. I don't think that you haven't done a great job being on the board, so I don't want you to think that way at all. Some of their benchmarking numbers are from 2018 with some of these places. So, I mean, obviously, I don't know if that's just what they could pull up, but 2018, 2019, these numbers wouldn't even be reflective of COVID times for any of these centers, other than perhaps Airdries. So there's that. And then I have asked, but I'm still waiting to receive their asks, both operationally and capitally from 2017 to 2020 and then what they actually received from council. So I would like to see that information, as well as we have asked, I think numerous times now, about their work chart, but not just like their work chart now, but in comparison, and no names, I don't need to know that, but positions to positions. So if there was one person in marketing from, and now there's 5 people in marketing, that's the kind of information that I'd like to see brought forward, just so I understand where some of their dollars are going for before I am prepared to vote.
Okay, so administration's getting that information for you? Okay. Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's, and I completely agree with the rest of council. Council Reid's done an excellent job of sharing their updates and keeping us updated. That's not the challenge. The challenge is we are in COVID times. Revenues have changed, expenses have gone up. There's an understanding that we really need to be as tight as we can with our budgets. You know, people, it's tough times. People are surviving. You know, they're taking hits to their jobs. They're taking, having to, you know, sometimes defer their mortgage payments. People are scared. It's a terrifying time. And the only thing really, or one of the main things that we as the town of Cochrane can do to help offset that, you know, I can't affect what the federal government does. I can't affect what the provincial government does. I can't affect COVID, but I can affect what happens to your provincial tax, or to your municipal tax rate. And so that's always been my approach to Spray Lakes, is this is a financial challenge that we really need to get a hold of. I think earlier in our debate, like it's $300,000 is a 1% tax rate increase. And so when I'm looking at the historical asks, it's just, this is something we have to get a hold of, because we can't afford as a community these costs. If we as a council are saying we're trying to hit a 0% tax rate increase, how do we continue to provide the services? What are our priority services? A lot of conversations today and yesterday around the needs versus the want list. A robust, fully functioning rec center is clearly on the want list. Many municipalities have had to make tough choices about the service levels they're providing in their rec centers. We have a different situation. So when I'm looking at this, and I regret that even in this email that we received, that the questions are being taken personal. That's never my intent. I've tried to make sure that I'm respectful in asking about numbers and keeping it about numbers. It's not about people. It's about the cost to the taxpayer and the service levels we can afford. So my concerns is the increase of the service level. So, and I'm looking at this in 2 pieces. The capital is one side of it. The physical maintenance of the building, the capital costs, all of those things I have no problem with. We need to fund those. That's our asset. We need to come up with a plan to work with Rockview County as the co-owner to make sure that we're sharing that equitably. We haven't managed to score that solution yet. No problem with that whatsoever. It's the operational cost that really I have a concern with. And, you know, speaking to how this was set up, in adding the pool there and the curling rink there, and I don't think anybody can say that wasn't a good idea. We've created an amazing rec center that's, you know, the envy of the region. Having been there, it certainly wasn't a forced on anybody experience. The initial idea of putting the pool there was actually advocated by a Rockview County councillor, and so it was a very much a dialogue to get there. Where we are today, though, is how do we deal with the operational costs? So, and I support where staff are on the capital side, but so 2019, and again, I agree with the philosophy that, you know, pools and curling rinks, these are traditionally areas that aren't cost recoverable. And I have always been committed to making sure that that gap is covered. So 2019, that gap that the municipality funded was about $950,000. And that was money, my understanding, that would cover the operational gap of the pool and those gaps. But then 2020, we provided 1.5. And so that included part of the COVID world. Right, and now we're looking at 2. But so you're looking at an extra $1 million in operational costs moving ahead. That's like a 3% tax rate for one area of our community alone that not everybody uses. It should be here, it should be something that people can access, but a 3% tax rate alone, just to create or maintain a level of service for an item that not everybody uses, it's not fair to the balance of taxpayers. And in the COVID world, if we're aiming for zero, I think we have to make some tough choices. So again, that's why I support setting a level of 2 million all in. My concern operationally, and again, it's not personally, is that in these 3 years, when our municipality has actually cut services, reduced management levels, held the line on steps and wages for our own staff, that when you look at their CRA reports, they've actually increased their management salaries, which has a concern for me. So I respectfully ask them to have a look at that, because I don't think that's the approach is respectful of the taxpayer dollars. We have other community partners that run facilities and help our residents. So the Rocky View Foundation, they run a $5 million annual budget. They provide housing for our seniors. When I look at their wages, I'm not concerned. So that's my area. So the operational costs have jumped up. I don't believe it's just because the building, that the pool was built wrong and we need to be fixed. Those capital costs, I fully support fixing. It's the pure operational increase that our taxpayers are going to have to pay, whether they use it or not. So that's where I'm coming from. Just purely, I need to keep our taxes down and making sure that it's a service level that's of value to the community.
Councillor Reid?
Yeah, just a couple of things. One is, I think, well, at least some members of council and administration have identified that the facility has been chronically underfunded for years. Secondly, well, I wouldn't want to pretend I could speak for everybody in the community. I can tell you that if ever there was a time for a need for recreation in a facility, not just people hanging around outside, it is now. The third thing is that it's ironic that we're having this discussion when other communities are pouring more money into their recreation facilities at this time than cutting back. But I do respect the fact that we are in COVID times, that these are tough times. I don't appreciate the opinion that the Spray Lakes Board is not being respectful of taxpayers' dollars. That's not true. I think in terms of management, the change in management over the couple of years, I think that the board has recognized that the individuals they hired and the caliber and quality of those individuals was not sufficient to be able to run a facility of that size, and that's why things have changed operationally. But yeah, I think that we are in COVID times. These are tough times, but I also think these are times when people look to those kinds of facilities, whether they're families or seniors or whatever, to be able to have some recreation to address the kind of stress that they're under. And to suggest otherwise is, yeah, I don't think is real.
Okay, so far Councillor Nagel's been the only one that's identified a number specifically that he'd like to see going forward in the budget. So if we can start to circle around that would be appreciated. Councillor Fedeko?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple comments. Yesterday we talked a lot about our needs versus wants. So a need to me is having my my streets plowed. It's having my garbage picked up. Those are real needs that I need to pay for as a person living in Cochrane. A want is being able to go to a rec center or a rec facility or having recreational opportunities. There are also many private places here in town, private businesses that, offer rec opportunities. I'm a little saddened to kind of hear the comments that, when it came to the board saying, that they ended up rehiring different people because the people that they thought were not equipped to be able to run that facility before, but yet the only thing that I've seen since that transition has happened is an increase in operational costs all the way across the board. And so I'm disappointed in that comment, actually. I too, like Councillor McFadden, we've stated many, many times, this is not anything personal with this facility. It just isn't. But yet it constantly comes back that us asking questions gets, and that's too bad on their part, because I think that this letter is not going to serve them overly well. when we are asked from members of the community to check into something and look deeper, that's really what we've done. We've asked questions multiple times over, and we haven't gotten things answered up until the last minute now, when obviously we've had to push. The big picture is, you know what, this year is not as concerning, but next year we have a predicted tax rate of, you know, like 10, 11, 12%. I mean, honestly, like our residents cannot handle that. I mean, we don't know, again, provincially, federally, what's going to be coming down. I'm not in support of having a big tax rate like that. And this is really one of the biggest areas in our budget that can drive that tax rate down. I'm not saying that I want to see the facility close. I don't want to see, you know, that we're trying to do it harm, but I do have questions, and that's why I've asked for that work org chart, and not just from 2020, but in a comparison to find out if it's running in the most efficient manner. Again, I'm like Councillor McFadden, it's not the capital request. I have no issue with that because obviously things need to be repaired. But I'm kind of tired of it always coming down to being blamed on the pool and blamed on the curling rink. It's not like we didn't realize that, you know, those amenities were going to be added, but it becomes an easy out. And that's kind of, I think, what ends up happening. They had a lot of people still working there during COVID. A couple programmers, I believe. There was no programs running. So when I do question how they operate, those are some of my concerns. But like I said before, until I kind of see some more of that information, I'm not necessarily comfortable putting a dollar figure on it yet, but I would like to see 2021 separated out and voted on separately versus 2022 and 2023.
Councillor Flowers?
Yes, and I would agree with that we should look at 2021. It's been a terrible year this year, and we don't know what the future holds, but we have to get through this. And I think from what I see, they're doing the best that they can, cutting the staff back from 197 to 126 and getting as many grants as possible. I don't believe if the town of Cochrane was running it that we could have done as good a job as what the nonprofit is doing. The pool does take a lot of resources. There's just no getting around it. The old pool costs us 600 and some thousand a year, and this one's always going to be over $1 million. So there's just no getting around these costs if we have to keep the place going. The benchmarking shows that they're doing well in comparison to other groups, so I'd really like us to fund them for this next year and help them get over this hump and then see where it goes.
So you're satisfied with what's in the budget for 2021? Councillor Nagel?
Two things. Firstly, I realized I said I wanted to give the SLS their request this year. I meant the administrative recommendation, just to clarify. And then second thing, just on the topic of needs versus wants, it's funny because many years ago, a few years ago, I was in here saying there's no way the rec center was a need, it was a total want. But I think in this COVID context, I think some physical recreation is definitely a need. I think the long run impacts of people having to work from home, having their community events canceled, having shows and concerts canceled, having sporting events being stressful, I think it's going to have a serious impact on people's mental and physical well-being. And I think, honestly, there's a lot of people who are kind of deep in depression and they're starting to lose their mind a little bit because I know people who have been locked in an apartment for 12 months almost, or just 9 months now. But this rec center is a space for people to go, get some fresh air, get some exercise, do something fun. And I think, especially with the cold weather during the winter, it definitely is a need for our community to get everybody through this tough time.
Okay, Councillor Nagel. Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, I completely agree. Recreation is so important for everybody's physical and mental wellness. I mean, it's why I'm a champion of recreation, and that we need to have a look at it seriously next year in the different options, because there's different ways to recreate. It's just the cost of it alone. And there's trade-offs like that we're going to have to make. So $100,000, like we've talked about the need to do more economic development to help with our recovery. $100,000 would be that business development position, right? We've got, due to the provincial funding cuts, the Safe Couch program for kids is off the table. So you've got I don't even know, like 20 plus was the last number, kids that don't have a place to like sleep. So there's a lot of things that we could do with $100,000. And I'm just using that number as a comparison. And so many of our other nonprofit groups that when their costs increase incrementally, we've held them to account. And this is, like I said, 2019, 951,000. This year, 1.5, 2, and they're higher. So my approach to this, again, the capital I have no problem with. We clearly need to work with the county, though, and make sure that as equal partners, we're equally responsible for that bill. And then also work with our own team and the Spray Lakes team to determine those priorities, just like we are going to do in our own capital campaign, or capital plans. But again, it's just the operational. $2 million, and there's going to be, with COVID, less people able to recreate than ever before, because you're going to have the distancing requirements, the access. Nobody knows what's going to come, like where our numbers are going to go and what impact that's going to have. So to put this much money to hold a facility, anyway, I struggle with it for sure, and I certainly struggle with the increase in operations.
Councillor Fedayko?
And just a point, I too, it's not that I'm against recreation, but this is not a free facility. So when we had Jerry Maitland from the library come forward, and she talked about how she had granted out X amount of free library cards, right? So people are able to access those services for free, community members, where this is not free. So anybody that's going to go to the facility still has to pay for it. So it isn't, so then you're taking that amount and every single taxpayer has to pay for it, regardless of whether or not they use the facility, because they have to pay for it once and then they have to pay for it again to go there. And it's not to say, again, that I don't find it valuable in our community. I just question in those operating costs if they're doing things effectively and efficiently. And again, kind of like you said, Councillor Nagel, I had that same question. Why hadn't those costs been decreased over a 3-year budget? Instead, we're seeing them almost stay the same, if not go up slightly in request, I believe, right? So I would think that, you know what, even if COVID stuck around for another year, you have a lot of downtime now. There's less programming happening to become more creative. What are they doing to become more creative? To me, that number should actually be decreasing, not staying status quo. And I think that they probably did not help themselves by not kind of putting some more thought into that, even when they approached the town with their numbers, to think, how can I get better? So that's my concerns. That's it. And it's not about poking around and saying that, you know, it's not valuable or we don't want it. That is never the case. It's just about taking a real clear look at the numbers and doing the best that we can for all our residents here in Cochrane.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. I wanted to share the thoughts of the rest of the table. Councillor Reid, I think you've done an excellent job on this board, and thank you for all your work. Councillor Nagel has already expressed my mind where I look at it, and I think the current administrative recommendation of $1,700,000 makes sense for 2021. I'm uncomfortable with the projections upcoming in 2022 and 2023, $1,900,000, $2,120,000. I'm hoping that our revenue projections are very conservative and that those numbers wouldn't be required, and if they were, I definitely agree with Councillor Nagel that we should be back here a year from now discussing it again, and whoever's warming the seat can make that decision then. But for right now, 2021 is all I'm comfortable with, and I would be projecting the same totals for 2022 and 2023 would be my recommendation, so $1,700,000 across the board. I have one thought to the group here, and that's that I understand the need to group or to lump our capital and our operational together, and the reason why we're doing that. Do we have any concerns about, in this case, lumping that together and being worried about capital monies bleeding into operational and leaving capital short? I just wanted to see what the table thought about that, but otherwise I think I'm settled on where I'm landing here, so that's what I throw to the group.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Reid?
Just a couple of comments. One is, I think that the recommendation of administration as it relates to Spray Lake, I support as well. I think need versus want. I think that the needs of Spray Lakes are as equal as Light Up, for example, right? I think, Morgan explained that really well. I think there's a community that's hurting, and just as we supported Light Up, I think as a need, I think the Spray Lake recreation is a need. you know, there'll always be those people in our community who are naysayers about having to pay for a facility they don't use, but those are the same people who complain about school taxes. One of those is my wife, because we don't have kids in school.
This is being recorded.
Yeah, right. And even Colt, right? I mean, you know, there was some discussion initially that Colt was going to be able to pay for itself, and we're now recognizing that that's not ever going to be the case, that it's going to be a 700,000 plus kind of draw on the community. And so there will be services that we do provide for members of our community at some cost that need to be subsidized. The revenue projections, Councillor Wilson, are at 60%. So I think that's very conservative in terms of being able to move the agenda forward. And I do agree that I think it's wise to separate capital and operations, or capital, and operations. So I would support that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Reid. I'll weigh in now, I guess. Lots being talked about around the table, but first I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the volunteer board that operates this facility on our behalf. I think that a lot of times goes forgotten, that these people are volunteering their time 7 o'clock in the morning, worrying about a $100 million asset that the town owns. And whether we agree entirely with how they're doing it or not, I just would like to thank them for their efforts. Where we got to, or where we came from to where we are today, rocky road. From my perspective, this is not the year that we need to hold people to account in recreation. And I'm not saying to just sign a blank check. I'm suggesting that we get back to what's presented. I agree that administration's done a good job of highlighting the operational amounts, which I agree should carry forward through the 3 years, 1.7. The capital, if we want to talk about capital, and I agree that it should be separated, we need to ensure that a lot of the things that they've highlighted in their report are being maintained, upheld, and replacement of the asset. That's just good business. The original ask from the rec center, I might add, was $800,000 for capital in 2021. So we are underfunding capital in this budget already. And I'm okay with that in 2021 as well. But I just wanted to highlight that there's a discrepancy from what we're already suggesting we fund to what they're asking for. So there's a risk associated with that we heard loud and clear from the board when they presented to all of us. And that was certain items could fail, etc. We deal with that in every department across the board in the town. This is no different. So we understand there's risks associated with that, but I just wanted to highlight that there is a significant gap in that funding. I agree, Councillor Nagel, that recreation this year has been that thing that at least Albertans, it looks like Canadians have embraced the outdoors, trails, rivers, lakes, whatever. They're all over capacity. If we are to take a cut now to services on indoor facilities, I think that's a mistake on our part. This is a need at this point, and I think that for the mental health of our community, this is the time that we continue to hold the line. And the one thing that I think that we're overlooking is that, and Councillor Reid, you mentioned this, that administration reported to us a month or two ago that they suggested that we have been, as a community, underfunding the facility for the previous 2 or 3 years. So to go back and look at 2019 or 2018 is looking at a number that's already underfunded from our own administration. So to come back to a $1.7 million ask for a COVID year with a 60% budget, I think is fair. The salaries, I mean, I don't want to get into the weeds of what people make or don't make. From my perspective, if we are to treat this facility as another department of the community, like another department, then we hold them to the same standard, and that is that we fund the budget request, and they do with the funds what they operationally see fit. I don't have any problems. I have not heard from one person in the community about how the facility is being operated. Should the ice be colder? Should the pool water be warmer? I have heard about showers. I haven't heard about any of those types of things other than that one, but I understand they're working on that. So from my perspective, this is something we need to just bite the bullet and see what this next year brings us. The one item that I would bring up, and this is somewhat sideways, but I would ask that, and Councillor Reid, you mentioned this, and I'm happy that you did. I've spent a lot of time with the mid-sized city mayors group talking about recreation. What are they doing? What are they responding? We're in a different position. Our third-party board operates this facility on our behalf for Rocky Bay County and the town of Cochrane. Most communities, it's internal. Every single community obviously has been hit with COVID, and the biggest cost has been recreation. Most other communities are hiring more staff in their recreation departments for more cleaning and sanitizing. They're putting the MOST grant, the Municipal Operating Support Transfer Grant from the province, to offset those costs at the tune of millions of dollars. We have $200,000 that we're allocating from that MOST. And I would suggest that that doesn't, on our behalf as the organization that owns the facility, lend itself to us treating them like a department of the community. I would like to see that number increased. So the cost in 2021 does not need to be that high. I would like to see where the rest of the MOST grant is going in our budget. And I would suggest to you that we could offset this COVID year, 2021, with a grant from the province that is designed exactly for that. And we can take this discussion, or whoever's in these chairs next year can look back on that year and see if the 60% came to fruition and what 2022 is looking like. That is my suggestion. And that is all I have to say on this matter at this time. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, so I just wanted to come back to the point that, we've been underfunding it, which we're just looking at our own budget this year. And from the gap between what our staff have asked for operationally to deliver, the community, to plan, to build a complete community, to make sure we have all the options, and I think where council's going is much reduced. And our own staff's capital requests, we're not going to fund those all the way to every project. So you always, in any budget, will have those operational and capital deficits between, in the ideal world, if you had infinite money, and what reality is. And so this year, reality is revenues are tight. And so there can't be any part of our budget that is immune to being looked at. We talked about yesterday that our budget reflects our values. And so we need to demonstrate that no part of any department gets an exception. And so one of the things you said, which I agree with, is, we should look at treating this like a department and have the same standards. I completely agree with that. But again, the part that I've struggled with is, if we're looking at this department, we wouldn't be paying the department head what we'd be paying, the executive director. So I really am asking that the board could have a look at their management fee costs, because it's not in alignment with my understanding of what you would be paying for recreation if it was managed by a municipality for like-sized municipalities. So it's so important that we do recreation, but it needs to be clear that this is a municipal facility, and this is a partnership that's worked well for a number of years, and I value the volunteers that have made it happen and all the donors that have made this facility happen. But we owe it to everybody to make sure we're being as responsible with that dollar as possible. And that's why the tough questions. It's nothing personal at all. It's just that when we're going out to the community, we need to be able to say that every dollar that we invested for you got the best value.
Councillor Reid?
Yeah, I appreciate that last comment. I can tell you that the Spray Lake administration had a proposed budget that they took to the board that, well, first of all, they did a refinement in terms of what, like our senior administration did, and then the board did a further one. And so what you're seeing is ultimately the budget of that refinement process. So it wasn't as if this budget did not go through that kind of scrutiny. Yeah, in terms of management costs, I'm willing to take that back to the board and review that. I think in relation to that, I know that the board has a subcommittee that has looked at like salary costs across the province and comparing apples to apples, and have done research on that. Again, the members of this board are a lawyer, an accountant, a vice president. It's not, these are well-qualified people, in addition to being volunteers and giving up their time. But I would take that challenge. Yeah, and in terms of being able to treat it equally, I don't know what Drew makes, or I don't know what Catherine makes, and I don't particularly care what their salary is, to be honest. I just know that this is the allocation we provided those departments, and that they are being managed properly, and whoever supervises them does that. So if we're going to treat the Spray Lakes board or Spray Lakes as a department, then I think we want to be able to be equitable in that sense as well.
Councillor Federico?
That might be kind of amusing to me because I believe you were the one that brought forward the Sunshine List from a few years ago, so we actually know what those positions are. They're released publicly. They're public document right on our town website. And I believe that was your motion to do that years ago. And I do agree with, treating Spray Lakes as another department, but there was reluctance, I believe, from some of their members that they didn't necessarily want to be treated as another department. They felt that they were separate, right? So I have concerns about that. And let's face it, this is a very hard year, and we sit in our seats, and we have to look at our own staff that are in town positions that have not had a step increase. They've not had any sort of salary increase. There's COLA on the table. There could be looking at taking away some of their benefits. So we keep on handing down, I guess, or penalizing, I don't want to say maybe, but having our own staff and having to look hard at those operational costs and what they're able to get. And then here is an organization that comes forward, and yes, I agree, COVID bad times, but their asks are going up. And if we don't know as a municipality how they're choosing to spend those operational dollars, that's my concern. Because if we ran that, we could easily say, hey, you know what, those costs have gone up, but it's because of X, Y, Z, and we also know that those people are not getting raises, they are not getting any sort of increase. But this way, if we give them money, we don't know if any of those people are getting a bonus or if they aren't getting a bonus. We're told that we can't ask those questions. So that's where, as a town, when you run the whole department, you know exactly what that forecast is, but we don't know in this case. We're giving them money and we're just assuming that they're not going to be increasing, but we don't know that. I certainly don't, and we can't ask. So again, when it comes down to making hard choices, I also have to think of the many other people that live and work here, that we're going to be taking a real hard look at what they're going to be getting going forward too. And not just this year, because I'm telling you that 2022, 2023, we need to drive down that percentage of a tax increase. And you're going to have to start thinking long and hard of what we're going to be taking away from our own people that also work from the town. And if we're just going to blanket them and continue to give them what they're kind of asking with, chopping out some of it, I don't think we're even doing our due diligence by not questioning that further and not really asking those hard questions. And I agree, it was never anything personal. But unfortunately, I want to know where that money is being spent, because it's not necessarily, it's not grant money or anything like that. This is our taxpayer money, so it comes from all the residents.
Councillor Nagel.
Question for Councillor Reid. Do you know if the board and the whole society is open to freezing salaries, as is being talked about in other places?
That's a reasonable request, and I'll give it that for sure. I actually know it. So
Okay.
I understood that the comment was that the Spray Lake staff, the board should consider treating the Spray Lake staff like we do the town staff.
Okay.
That would be happening.
Okay.
That's a fair request. I'll take that forward.
Okay. And then I personally think we should, give you some requests to go back to the board with, and then we agree on a number here today, so we don't spend the entire day talking about this. It is very important. I'm not trying to belittle the importance of the issue, but I think we should come up with a number, come up with some requests, ask them to meet these requests, and I think a salary freeze across the board is certainly a fair one to make the request. But
Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, I mean, I like the way that conversation's going. I would prefer that they look at more than a freeze, because it's actually increased over the last couple of years. But the one question I did want to highlight is I do want us to lock down in our granting language that the portion will go to operations and a portion to capital. I don't, Councillor Wilson highlighted that. I don't want to see that, bleed across.
Okay, so we've had at least 4 of us talk about keeping the amount the same. Councillor Wilson, you have something more to add?
Very little, but thank you. I think that got the answer that I wanted, which is that we want to establish 2 different funds, an operational and a capital, it seems like. I think we're settling on a number, which is great. I'm also glad, Mr. Mayor, you pointed out thanking the board of volunteers. We had an opportunity to meet, and pleased to say they all seem very intelligent, capable, competent. I have every confidence they're going to navigate us through this. And the management too, the CAO and Mr. Fileski and Ms. Wagner, who we met, very competent, very capable. I have every confidence they'll get this sorted out. So it's just a simple, how do we want to, I think if we have a number solidified, and it seems like we do, how do we want to break it down? I put to the chair, it might be the next topic of conversation.
Yeah, I think what I've heard is 1.7 operation, the transfer to organizations across the 2021, 22, 23 years, and keeping the, I was going to suggest throughout these discussions this week that we actually increase the amount of our capital, but let's cross that bridge next year. So I'm happy with the 300 split. Basically, as presented, just the increases over the next 2 years are held operationally. And that's what I'm hearing from most around the table. I heard a light. Mr. Hyman, sorry, Ms. Van Kijnpima.
I just wanted to provide some clarity on the MOST grant. Just to make sure that all the information is out there. So the MOST grant is available to help municipalities offset the impacts of COVID-19 on their operational costs for the period of March 2020 through March 31 of 2021. Therefore, we've included $200,000 as a funding source for Spray Lakes funding, recognizing that in the first quarter, which is the qualifying quarter, that was an estimate as what we thought might be the proportion that would be the impact from COVID. The remaining amount of the grant is to cover off the costs that are incurred by the town for that 1-year period, as well as the $750,000 funded to Spray Lakes Rec Center during 2020 to help support them while they were closed and still were incurring expenses.
So to clarify, the 750 has been repaid with the MOST?
Yes, it will be covered from the MOST grant rather than a draw from reserves.
So then there will not be the need for that 0.5% to repay the grant?
Correct.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you. So on that, in the other thing that's ballooning the 2023, why is it a line item in here for other, the $250,000 in 2023? On the page 67, sorry.
And the reason for that is because we're drawing from the tax stabilization operating reserve to fund the support from reserves in 21 and 22. So the idea was that then we would start having sufficient tax increase to refill the tax stabilization fund, because we will have almost drained it by doing so.
Would we do that to one of our own departments in the same fashion?
If we drain the tax stabilization reserve, we would have to have a plan for filling it back up again, or making a conscious decision to not have any money in there.
Yeah, and I'm not arguing the need for that
But yes, we
reserve.
would do that.
So if council's suggesting to keep the operational costs at 1.7, could we then remove that 250 from 2023?
Council can do whatever you wish, of course.
Okay, I just, yeah, well, that's 2 years away. We'll argue about that in 2 years if we're lucky enough. Anyone else have anything to add? Subtract? Okay, we can, not sure how we want to move on. We could vote on it. I think it's pretty clear, but we'll park that now until the end. I think we've got a majority of going for what I proposed, the 1.7 across the board and 300 for capital. No, I think we'll deal with it at the end when or separate it out if I heard yesterday that we wanted to separate this item, so we can do that. So we're good? Want to take a break? Okay, take a 15-minute break. Back at, what is that? 15 minutes from now?
Record that, while I wasn't absolutely sure, I've confirmed that there have been no salary increases or COLA increases at Spray Lakes for the last 2 years. So no salary, no COLA, and they're treating them just as a town department for the last 2 years. So I just want to put that out for public record.
Okay. Okay. Well, I was hoping not to get into debate again. Councillor McFadden?
So that's for 2019 and 2020? Because the information I was looking at was what was reported on the CRA. So the 2 years that I was referring to were the 3 years that I was referring to were the reported years, so. That's all. I just want, if we're clarifying, those are the numbers that I was looking at, was the numbers that were reported to the CRA and publicly available.
Okay. We're just for information. Okay. What's next on the docket? Are we going back to the board, or are we going to get into capital?
I would suggest we start to look at the capital projects in case we have more things to add to the board.
Okay.
And then we can move into deliberations as a whole.
All right, so we'll just go through page by page.
Well, I mean, it's up to you. There's a lot of different capital projects. I know last year what we did is kind of looked at the summary sheet. So this year at least we have summary sheets now. And then we can kind of look at the summary sheet, and that's on page 69. And then perhaps if members of council have questions on a particular project, unless you feel that it would be more useful to go project by project.
No, I'm good to proceed however anybody's comfortable doing so. I think maybe we start on page 69. That's a good starting point. Anybody have any high-level comments on any of the page 69? Councillor Reid?
So the comment earlier, Catherine, was that the difference between the capital request last year in the budget and this year is that there is a contingency fund. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a combination of two things. One is there was a number of projects that did not contain a contingency for 2020, which they do now. And the second thing is, as we get closer to knowing exactly what the project looks like, we get better estimates, so there are price changes to some of the projects.
And the contingency fund, what percentage is that set at?
It depends on how far away we are from having a detailed design. I believe that if it's just a very high-level estimate, our policy states that we have to have a 35% contingency, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong. As you get closer to detailed design, it's a 15% contingency.
And just for my own information, because I'm not familiar with that world, is that comparable to other communities? Do they do that in that level of percentage?
in my experience from the communities that I've come from, I haven't seen a contingency policy in that same sense. And different communities do different things. Some don't put any in until they get to a point where the project's pretty much ready to go, and then they would put a contingency in. Yeah, I think it's all over the board.
Okay, and it's nothing that's of value at some future point to review?
There is definitely plans to review that policy to make sure that it still reflects how Town of Cochrane would like to conduct and include the costing for proposed projects.
Okay, thank you. That was just an overview.
Okay.
Mayor, I can provide some additional information with respect to what the policy outlines as far as percentages based on where they are in the project, if that would be helpful for council, or if you want that information now. Otherwise, I can share the copy of the policy with all of council so you have that.
I think it's good later.
Okay.
I don't think we need it ASAP. Thank you, though. Councillor Flowers?
Just a couple of questions. The fire services master plan, did we not just do one of those 3 or 4 years ago?
So there was a fire services master plan, I think dated 2016, I believe. While it was brought to council, it was not officially implemented, and it is quite outdated at this point, given the growth in the community. So it is time to look at what the future of the fire service is. It will encompass things such as the strategic priorities for that department, as well as future locations, strategic locations for additional firehouses or fire halls in the future.
Thanks, the years go fast.
They do.
And the other one, we did approve the boardroom technology last year, but it just got bumped a year, did it?
I don't think it happened. Yeah.
That was one of those projects that we came shortly after COVID originally hit, where we were trying to navigate how we were going to cover off the impacts of that, and that was one of the capital projects that we pushed out.
And the one I'd like to add is about the Big Hill Lodge. Is this the time?
I don't know. I guess that would be yeah, sure.
It's something that probably gets parked, but the $100,000 to start looking at the underground services on the Fifth Avenue site, just so that we can make a little step forward on that.
What was the name of that program? I think Mr. Weldon had.
It's servicing, through the, Mr. Mayor, it's a servicing study for Fifth Avenue lands.
Okay, and that's what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, maybe we'll park that.
Thank you.
Looks like a red item. I haven't figured out the code yet, but it looks like red. Councillor Reid.
Curious, is there an evergreen program that relates to computing needs, computers, printers, and that kind of stuff? And likewise, is that, I'm not sure if it's the proper title, but for the fleet replacement, is that kind of an evergreen kind of plan? Is that how that works?
Yeah, so you'll see under fleet and equipment, there's a technology life cycling amount that has an amount each year, and that is to replace equipment as it's aged.
Okay. Thank you. I just couldn't find it.
Councillor Wilson?
Just a general question to administration for all the pages upcoming here, all the capital improvement projects. I thought we had a really useful discussion when we were talking about our council priorities and outlining a few things that, you know, given the year we've had, opportunities to either defer or I guess just move around some of our capital projects. Is there anything identified from the leadership table that could be deferred or is unduly onerous on us given our new circumstances, or is that all reflected in the document in front of us?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilson, we did do that exercise as SLT. We had looked and determined which of these we could move around, and this is our best recommendation moving forward for you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Councillor McFadden?
So where we've kind of landed with the process is, do we have any particular questions on the list?
Yep.
Is that correct? Okay. I don't actually, what is a ranch house chiller and water tower replacement? I mean, we're replacing it, so we must need it, but I don't know what it is.
Air conditioning for the ranch house.
And you don't get to just reword it. It's a chilling thing at the ranch house, doesn't help me.
Anyone in admin want to I read that item. I'm pretty sure it's the air conditioning for the ranch house. That's what I read it as. It's on page 90. Yeah.
Okay,
Provide air conditioning at the ranch house.
okay. And then, well, can I request a heater for the ranch house?
A what, sorry?
A heater for the ranch house? I'm just saying, this side of the bench, it's super cold. That's fine. Then, I did want to highlight, I think it's great, the Bow Valley Rugby Club storage building. I think that's excellent. We probably need to determine some sort of policy about how we support different groups and their storage needs. Down to the utility projects, the Horse Creek Sports Park Master Plan update. So this year, we're going to be doing the detailed design and servicing, which is excellent. Where are we at in the actual official purchase of the land?
I can provide an update on that. So I have been working with administration, with the school division. There was some changes to the minister's letter that came approving and giving us, giving the school district the authority to dispose of the land to the municipality. So we are working through the finalized agreements to make sure that they are reflective of the MOU. So it's actually 2 agreements that we're trying to draft. They are sitting with me at this point after revisions from our legal counsel, which will be forwarded on to the school division. I do anticipate that we should be able to close, if not by the end of the year, by early 2021.
Okay, and refresh my memory of the cost of the purchase?
Do you remember? Yeah, it's right around 1.6, 1.7 million.
All right, thank you. Yeah, those are all the questions that came to mind. Oh, well, except for one, and this is just a historical thing of mine. Any of these truck fleet replacements, can they be put off at all?
I can speak to that. Some of them are in within my portfolio. Administration did undertake a significant review of all of the fleet assets that were being asked for, and any that could be postponed have been. There are actually assets that are in this year's fleet replacement that have already been pushed off for 2 years. So we look at everything, not just year and condition of vehicle from a aesthetics perspective, but also hours of maintenance and repair costs. So we did undertake a significant review of those, and what could be pushed out has been throughout the budget.
Okay, so it's not just a simple, the vehicle is so old, we're going to replace it. Each vehicle's actually been analyzed and evaluated to make sure that it does need to be replaced.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Federico?
A couple questions, and I agree with Councillor McFadden. I'm happy to see Bow Valley get a storage building. I can't remember if somebody could fill me in. Did Cochrane Minor Ball, did they contribute anything in way of funding their storage unit, or was it just funded from the town?
I don't think so.
I would need to confirm that information first. I don't believe so, but if you give me a moment, I'll confirm that.
Sure, just I think Councillor McFadden's right, like we should establish some sort of policy, and especially as we're looking at our whole community grant program, you know, if we're going to be asking, I think, organizations to be, you know, coming up with some sort of contribution, whatever that looks like, whatever that split looks like, we might want to make sure that we have some future wording, just so that, you know, if we're giving to, you know, once you're giving to one, then you're starting to give to all, right? So I just wanted to be cautious of that. When it says extending Highway 2220 to Sunset Boulevard, is that part of the interchange project, or is that talking about secondary access?
Sorry, I was trying to request the information.
Sorry.
So you had asked Councillor Federico about the extension of Highway 22. So that is part of our advocacy efforts, working with Melcor as well as the developer of Sunset Ridge to ensure when the intersection project proceeds, that it includes an extension up to Sunset Boulevard, which is our largest community. So we feel that that's an important initiative that we've been working on for the past several years.
Wait, I imagine that would be somewhat in relation to the interchange being done, completed, or on that path?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor
Mayor, I
Reid?
can
Nope,
confirm
sorry.
that the storage buildings were completely funded from capital reserve. That was a resolution passed by council, and it was something that was identified at the time, that you will likely have additional community groups coming forward for those now, which is part of why we, the facilities group, did make sure that those were facilities that could be relocated if and when required.
And just to clarify, I don't have a problem funding it. I just wanted to know exactly where that was going, just so that we know.
Yeah. Councillor Reid?
So this is kind of a free-for-all going at this, I guess. So I had a couple of questions that I had made earlier. So the finance procurement module, does the Diamond Finance software suite not speak to the Dayforce? Is Dayforce completely HR and this Diamond's finance suite separate?
Dayforce and Diamond are separate. The module being referred to as the capital project is one that actually will not automate, it will allow us to electronically send invoices that need to be coded and signed off by purchasing managers, and then get back to accounts payable without having to print them, send them, have somebody sign and put the code on, and send them back. So that's what the procurement module would do. So it's a bolt-on to the Diamond ERP software that we have.
Okay.
But then to feedback, no, Dayforce is used for payroll, and it does not speak to Diamond.
Okay, yeah, the Dayforce software that we have, the organization I work with does both that, so it's not pretty, but it works. If I could just ask a couple others. The alleyway repairs on page 103. Why, I'm not sure why that wouldn't be taxed to those people who are benefiting from that.
The alley repair?
Yeah.
Councillor Reid, those alleyways were under a development, so we have had issues with those. So again, I don't think it would be necessarily fair to those residents to tax them for those improvements. The town needs to assume the responsibility and proceed with these.
So is that, if I could ask this a supplemental question, so there are other areas in the town of Cochrane where residents have picked up the cost of those improvements. So was this something that got stale dated out and that the developer wasn't responsible for, or did we miss it? Or I'm just not sure why, I don't know why the others are paying for these kind of improvements and this community wouldn't.
Well, I think that in this case, we've had some issues, as you can see. The Civil Land Development is investigating a new standard for developments to avoid this in the future, which is because, again, we do not want to be in this situation. I think this is something that obviously is a situation we're trying to avoid, but I don't believe that there's been a number of other situations in this same case where individual residents have been paying for these improvements. We've had to correct this in a few different areas, and having a new standard is going to be our priority.
So
I can add some information if you'd like.
Pardon me?
I can add some information if you'd like. So
Sure.
I think what you're thinking, Councillor Reid, I think our word choice is incorrect. These aren't improvements. These are actually making it so that they have an alley that they can use to access the garages. When you're thinking about the improvements that we've charged benefiting properties for, that's under the local improvement levy
Right.
legislation through the Municipal Government Act.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking about.
And that's available when you're providing a group a higher level of service or asset than the rest of the town gets. And the rest of the town is able to use their alleys to access their garages, so this would not be considered a local improvement levy.
Okay, and that would by, well, I know it's stated at Glen Eagles, and those people would have, the community has paid for those improvements because of that, right?
Correct. So if it's an extra higher standard or
Right.
something that the rest of the community doesn't get and they really want it, then that's when you would charge your local improvement levy.
Okay, and then the last question, if I could, sorry, I don't mean to dominate the discussion.
No, that's why
On
we're here.
page 111, can you just give us an update as to what's happening with the water strategy? I mean, it seems to me when we first got together at our first strategic retreat as a council, this was a major priority, and I'm not suggesting no work is not being done, it just seemed it has gone silent recently, and I'm just kind of curious if you could update us.
Councillor Reid, following the reorganization, Mr. Deans was responsible for that, so certainly that has taken, is one of the factors, but we have made some recent progress. We will be coming forth to council in December with an update. Given that it is confidential, I think at this point, I won't really be able to share much more information than that,
Okay.
but there has been progress. So,
Great, thank you. I appreciate that brief update and look forward to hearing more. Thank you.
Councillor McFadden, you found another thing on the list?
Did find another thing on the list. The CP rail siding track removal. Remind me why that's on our bill. Why are we paying for that?
Mr. Heineman?
through the chair to Councillor McFadden in order to do the crossing, at-grade crossing within the downtown, so at the transit hub. One of the things that CP has indicated that we will be responsible for is taking out that siding. It's partially for safety because they want to reduce the length of that crossing. As part of our negotiations and working with CP, they have indicated for us to be able to proceed, we would need to complete that work. So that's what we'll be doing in 2021.
All right, thank you.
I don't see anyone else's lights on. I just had, I had questions on actually a lot of the things that have already been asked, so I won't repeat them. But the, just the general approach to the capital projects, and I've heard on some of the fleet replacements, and I highlighted that at the beginning, and then I read through the request, and I agree they're, you know, we need to move forward with that, but it's, I'm glad that we had that discussion. Same with the additions. The other comments were the, and then this is back on the MSI, if they're, and generally, I think we as council go through this and look for changes we can make to a tax rate. And while I have really nothing to say or argue with any of these projects, I agree that administration has done a great job in highlighting what we need to move forward with. It's just a general comment on grant allocations, and if that amount comes down that 20 or 10 or whatever it is, maybe it stays the same, that'd be awesome. But if it comes down, have we, like, what would affect this? And I guess the better way of asking is that if the MSI doesn't come through as projected, this, you would take another look at this and push things off into 2022 as needed?
Certainly, and I did prepare a summary of 21 through 23, what's the usage of grant dollars. So the budget from 21 to 23 uses up $2,062,000 in MSI, $3,042,000 of basic municipal transportation grant, $1,614,400 in gas tax fund, and just shy of $4 million of other grants, meaning Green Trip and the municipal stimulus program grant. So given that our allocation was 4.6 in 2020, and we do have some dollars carrying over, at the end of the 10 years, we've used up the grant money, but in the 3-year period, I'm very confident that should the province change their mind about the 4.6, that we will be able to weather that storm and still deliver on these projects.
Awesome, thank you for that. The only one other than the Mitford Park, I think we were going to talk about the Mitford Park pathway upgrade. That one and the 4th Avenue Bridge design and replacement. Maybe I'll start with the 4th Avenue Bridge. Is that something that we could just repair until we have a greater plan for that? You know, after, I'm thinking about the Connecting Cochrane, the master transportation plan. If there is to be a corridor, and I'm not trying to suggest that we're building another road somewhere, but if that master plan suggests that corridor be utilized in a different fashion? Or are we basically repairing a bridge for nothing?
Mr. Mayor, I think there are a couple different steps in this process that we've identified. Obviously, the bridge is 65 years old, as indicated on page 104
Yeah.
for council who are following. And I'm just looking and trying to recall the two steps that we were going to do.
One was highlight
yeah.
or repair, and the next was to replace.
Yeah, it was the design. So we wanted to look at some different opportunities that to address this, because again, there's the cost and then there's the future planning as well. So I think in 2021, we would be, look at the design and include some of the geotechnical investigation, the survey, the approvals necessary, but also with a larger lens on this as well.
Okay. All right. Happy that that's the approach being taken. And then the same for the Mitford Park West Pathway upgrade, 101. And I'm not, again, not suggesting that I know better than the Parks Department on what needs to be replaced. It's just, is this the year to do that? That's my only question. And I see it's all from grants, but, and not affecting the tax rate, but you're suggesting it is by the fact that it's included in the draft.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Councillor Reid.
On page 99, the James Walker Trail connections. Drew, can you just walk us through that whole second phase?
Certainly, Councillor Reid. So the next phases that we'd actually be looking at is if you go to the roundabout that's in the River Song area, it would be the area that's heading further south up the hill. So there's a couple of different things that are occurring here. There is the stormwater pond that is necessary for phase 2. So that's the construction of the roadway. So that is going to take a bunch of material out of that area, and given the amount of material that we would be taking out of that, rather than importing material in the future, we wanted to take that material further up the hill and have that placed for future development of James Walker Trail once that proceeds. So again, there's the two portions to this, which would be in 2021, the removal of the material and the stormwater pond. So that's the $1.4 million and the placement of that fill. And then in 2022, the $500,000 is for the top lift of and paving of James Walker Trail, which is complete right now. I know there's been some comments from residents about a bumpy surface and things. This will ultimately address that as well. So hopefully that provides a explanation for you of that project.
And the stormwater pond, there's no responsibility of the developer that's not a developer's responsibility, it's a town's?
Well, it is this portion. There are some shared costs in this, but the construction of the facility itself was our responsibility, because the primary portion of it was the drainage from James Walker Trail. The developer's contribution will be coming because a small portion of the Precedence community does drain to that. But again, their contributions are going to be minor compared to the towns.
Okay, that was helpful, thank you.
Okay, I don't see anything else on capital. Going once. Looks like it's lunchtime anyways. Okay, we'll take a break for lunch for 30 minutes, an hour.
Mr. Mayor, I need to run to the parents' today.
So an hour? Okay, 1 o'clock. Coming back to wrap up, parking lot.
Well, what we could do is
Service
finish
fees?
providing you information, so do the service fees after lunch, and then we could turn it over to hammering out where we're going to land. So we have clear instruction for what you want the book to look like when it comes to you in December.
Okay, service fees at 1? All right. Okay, we're live, back, 2020 budget deliberations. Good afternoon. We're going to move into service fees now, I understand. And I look at your last name every time and I pronounce it in my head differently. I'm going to say it Galan. Okay. Like salon. That's what I told myself last time. And then I couldn't remember if that was right or not. So I'm right?
Yeah, you got it. It's bang on.
Well, welcome, Ms. Galan. Lead us through service fees, please.
Great. Good afternoon, Mayor Janang, council members, and senior leadership. I'm going to present to you the service fees as presented in the budget document. They start on page 147 of your budget books. So in terms of number of changes, there weren't a significant number this year. However, I wanted to highlight what did change. There were changes to the utility usage and base rates. The planning team put in some changes for the subdivision endorsement fees. The Ranch House Event Center increased their room rental fees, which was also part of the 2020 budget. Safety code fees changed a bit, and some of these changes, specifically in the instance of safety codes, was just to increase the clarity in terms of their fees and what was being charged for each specific service being provided. There was also an increase to the water radio read meters. There were a few decreases. The fire technical rescue fee went down, and in speaking with Chief Polly, it was just due to a review of the services being provided. While they're complex and require a high level of effort, he felt that in his review that it needed to be decreased in terms of the actual charge to do this. Disposal for microwaves and hot water tanks went down, and speaking with the manager of the Eco Center, the provider now was providing the service for free, so the savings was passed on to residents, which is really great news. In the draft budget, there was a charge put forward for the disposal of branches. We no longer are going to be charging for that. It's a change that you'll see in the final draft. And waste cart fees will remain the same. In speaking with the utilities team, they put forward the guiding principle for their review of rates, which is that they strive to have effective resource management, environmental stewardship, and leadership and financial effectiveness. If you recall, in a presentation from Finance approximately a week ago, utilities is important to our net income for the town. It's the second highest area of revenue after taxes. The increases in fees really reflect, which are reviewed annually, reflect growth in the community. So we see growth in residential and commercial. Vendor costs are rising, so the net inputs to produce these services are getting more expensive over time. And of course, we need to count in for the infrastructure and the repairs and maintenance needed to provide these services. In reviewing the sewer base rates, the 2020 fees are $8 to just shy of $600. In 21, these will be increased to $9.75. We do winter average calculations to perform our billings. So over the winter months, we are charged a average fee that is calculated based on your summer usage. A change that will be realized by residents is that when they use less water, they are recognized for the lower of usage or their averaging, which is a really great benefit. In 2021, the storm sewer rates went up 23 cents, waste and recycling is going up $1.10, and water is going up in a marginal amount. Ranch House and Community Event Center, and speaking with Ms. Bell, the manager of this area, the rates for 2021 and 22 were set forward in the 2020 budget. If you think of their business, really they've been booking for 2021, let's say weddings and other events in 2020, so those fees charged are based upon the 2021 fees. Increases in this area are reflective of comparable event facilities in Alberta, so trying to get that apple-to-apple metric. The 2021 and 2022 charges are applied to current bookings, as I mentioned, and just to keep in mind, we also do offer a community rate, so any community events that are happening are offered a reduction in their rental fees. So, as mentioned, just to summarize, the decreases in fees reflect changes to service levels. We're looking at comparatives, inflations, and other factors. We do try to measure as much as possible to figure out where we're going to set our fees each year for the budget. And there was one decrease in the fire technical rescue. You're probably familiar with this chart. It's just a glance at the average fees annually. So when we're looking at 2020 versus 2021, when you factor in everything from taxes to water, sewer, waste and recycling, the average resident will see an increase in 2021 of $5.65 monthly. And that's my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thanks for your presentation. We had a discussion about the FOIPOP fee, and I'm just wondering if those rates should be increased, like the search and retrieve, the $27, like, and that doesn't come anywhere near to covering, I know it doesn't come anywhere near to covering your cost, but I think that we should look at increasing those fees. There's nothing in the legislation that I know that would prohibit us from doing that.
Okay.
I guess that's...
Ms. Lowe, do you want to wade into this one?
So there is legislation that says how much the initial fee is, but no, you're correct. There's no limitation on what we can charge. Our approach historically has been that we are as open and transparent as we can be without penalizing the resident that is requesting the information. So at this point, we do our best to not incur significant charges back and charge those back to the resident, because primarily what we are seeing right now is these are residents requesting this information. And so we also start out with, at the beginning, there's a 5-hour window where there is no charge.
Right. Yeah, the only reason I raise it is the last university I worked for, we had a number of nuisance. Well, historically, I appreciate your kind of philosophy. We had a number of nuisance ones, and we actually had a range, and we used the range as opposed to an individual dollar amount. So those people who were really a nuisance, and there were, and I suspect maybe the town is starting to see some of those now, you could charge appropriately because it really is a nuisance fee.
Absolutely, and we have had that discussion at times. What we're experiencing right now is not that. So
Okay.
what we're experiencing right now is FOIP requests related to planning development, activity and development and growth in the community seems to be the largest incurrence of the requests that we're getting currently.
So if that would change, you would look to make a recommendation to council then?
Absolutely.
Okay. And can I ask one other question? I don't know where this would fall, but again, based on some previous experiences, the fire department had to go out to businesses that always had a kind of alarm that tripped off. And it became kind of a, pardon me?
The false alarm.
Yeah. Do we, like I know, again, as community I used to live in, that happened occasionally, but occasionally enough that it became a nuisance. Again, speaking about nuisance fees. So like the first time you could get away with it, the second time maybe, but the third time then the fire department would charge that individual or that business with a fee because there was actually a call that they had to go out to. Do we have anything like that?
Ms. Lowe, back to you.
I am scrambling to open the fire services bylaw because I cannot recall off the top of my head. I know we have discussed it. It is not something that we see a high volume of in our community because I think that we have a very active fire prevention department and duty crew that do go out and do inspections regularly. But I can certainly double check that and get back to you.
A brilliant response, thank you.
It's on, it's
Page
line item 2.
151. Page 151.
Yeah.
It speaks to, under the fire services, responding to an incident or false alarm.
Yeah.
And it's the amount expended, so we bill back the costs.
151, line 2. Okay. Councillor Badeko?
This just might be a question, and I don't even know if it's a possibility. Is there any places that you could raise service fees to offset some of those utility cost increases? Or is it like comparing apples to oranges kind of deal, like they can't be used together?
So I guess, is your question about how we determine what fee to raise?
No, it's just
Or-
that it's going to be hitting every single resident, right? Like it's a big jump for the utility cost. Are there any places that we could raise some service fees to offset or anything like that, or is it not at all connected?
So I do know that departments like sewer are doing their master plans, and part of that would be scanning where we compare in terms of other municipalities and looking at, usage and what, in terms of fairness, should be charged. So I know that master plan is almost done and will be presented to council, so it might provide more clarity on why we've taken the approach we've taken in terms of the fees and how they're set. So, which is a long answer, which probably isn't answering your question.
Yeah, I was just wondering like if there was like a pot of revenue, like so if you collected a pot of revenue, I think Catherine might have it.
Yeah, if I may, if you will recall, our utility departments are standalone, so they're not supported through taxes, and they're only supported through user fees, and those user fees are in the form of utility rates. So as our costs increase, if we want to continue with having our utilities being self-supported and not tax-supported in any way, the only real option is to increase user fees or draw from reserves, but you know how that story went this morning.
Yeah, okay, perfect, thank you.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. A couple quick questions. One was what we were just talking about. Would we be able to go back to the last slide?
Yeah.
Ms. Gellin, thank you. I was just looking at the $5.65 average monthly increase, and we just flashed by it very quickly, and I was assuming the bulk majority of that was for the water increases. Is that correct as I look down the slide? What's our largest increase on there that's resulting in that?
So dollar-wise, it would be from taxes, the proposed tax increase.
It's not just service fees, right?
Oh, I
Yes,
see,
yes.
right. Thank you. Okay, and then we've been over this, I guess it was the water and sewer increases, and I was just wondering, it's good to understand that they're self-supporting, as we just talked about, so as costs go up, the expenses have to go up. Is any part of this looking towards our water threshold that we're quickly reaching, that we're going to have to find new water license for? Does that have any contribution? Research? No. Okay. Thank you.
No, it does not.
The other question I had here was under business licenses. I'm looking at the event permit fees, and I was just hoping to get a understanding how well used event permit fees are and what sort of feedback we get off of them, especially things like a one-day event. I'm wondering who would be utilizing that? Any
Well,
examples?
funny you should ask. As a matter of fact, I've had conversations as the ranch house falls under my purview, and that includes Ms. Jermaine, who is the one who's our event permitting coordinator person. And actually what they've been finding is it takes a lot more of her time to be able to help people through the event process, and other departments are providing support. Quite often they need to put up roadblocks and signs and things like that. So if anything, the fee's too low.
Thank you. And so specifically on my mind is someone trying to do business in town, like a food truck might be a good example. Would they be getting an event permit fee when there was an event coming, or is that a business license?
And that would be one of those term non-residential business license if they're coming from outside of Cochrane, or term resident business license if they want to provide goods or services in town.
And so if that food truck was operating at an event, they wouldn't be paying the event permit fee, it would be the actual event.
It would be
Provider.
those term fees
Right.
towards the bottom of page 148. It talks about term fees, 3 or 6 months. So for example, if you were going to be having events over a period of time, so you're coming for the summer and you're going to set up your food truck through the summer, you might get a 3-month pass or permit. But then there is an event permit fee, so it's based on the number of days of your event, and that's a little bit further down from there. So they're based on the length of time for that event.
Okay, excellent, thank you. That helps clarify what an event fee is and what the term is. Thank you.
So just to round up that chart, 242 is proposed, that's the 1.27% draft proposed increase to
That's correct.
taxes. And then the fees would be $3.23. Yep. Trying to do math in my head, across the room,
You got it.
and breathe. Okay. Any other questions? Fees? Looks like you covered it in your presentation.
Great.
All right, thank you. Okay, that's cover to cover on the draft budget. I think we'll do a little bit of a roundup and then over to the parking lot. Where we stand.
I don't really have a roundup per se. I'm not sure what you were thinking, Mayor Chairman.
Just, well, we can head right to the parking lot. That's kind of the roundup, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay. Councillor Federico?
Do we have the ability for you to bring up, kind of like what you did last year, just the chart so that we can see, you know, what the tax rate is right now? If we take something out, what does it look like? Just so that we can kind of see those numbers as we go.
Yeah, I can put something together.
Okay.
I think what I've kind of heard from everyone is we're trying to hit the lowest increase possible, right? So 0. Why don't we, well,
Like if there were positions that we wanted to put in, right, versus
Yeah.
taking a number out, then I would like to see kind of what that looks like and how it might adjust.
yeah, well, we can kind of do that on the fly, I think, ourselves. We know that 288,000 is 1%. So we had those red, I'm just buying time for Ms. Van Kijnpema to get a spreadsheet going. So I'm not disagreeing, but if we go through so currently, what have we removed from the budget? Council remuneration is pretty much the only decisive number that we've removed. So that's 27,000.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. That's the only thing that I think council has been unanimous on.
So 2 days, $27,000. Well done, guys. Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, well, that's, I'd like to, and I'm sure it's with great reluctance, but I'd like to move the conversation back to the Spray Lakes discussion again. I just, over lunch, having a little bit of time to reflect on the information we received, and I did have a couple of questions, some clarification questions around the letter they sent us. Can we have that, can we reopen that discussion again?
Yeah, it's on the board, so.
I was just thinking, why Catherine is frantically doing spreadsheets.
Yeah, no, I think we need to decide on what we're doing with those, yay or nay, or, and I think that's really the only areas we've found that we want to move up or down in. So, yeah, take it away.
All right, thank you. So, anyways, having a chance to reflect on the letter we received, if someone could speak to the response to the potential 560,000 further decrease to the operating funding, where did that number come from? Do we know? Is that in response to the 2 million? Or is that in response to 1.7? What is that in response to?
Mr. Hyman?
Through the mayor to council, I can confirm I had the benefit of having a conversation with Mr. Fileski over lunch just to clarify some of these things. So there is reference in the letter to the $500,000. That is specifically in part of the discussion that he was able to follow yesterday, and heard that there would be subsequent cuts from the 1.7 to the operating budget. So that was in response to that. If this was to go to $1.1 million of operating budget, that they would have to ultimately respond, because just the opportunity to run all of these facilities with that type of operating budget. But given the discussion with council this morning, what I heard was continuing the operating budget at 1.7 in the 21, 22, and 23. He did confirm that they would be able to operate the facility, and they were pleased with that budget. So.
I don't remember having that conversation with those numbers in public.
It could be their error in going through the video from yesterday. I don't know what we're referring to here either, so.
Okay.
The 560,000?
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly where that's come from. That was the conversation that I just briefly had with him before I returned here.
So then the next part of it, which is causing me some concern, is that SLSC would close the aquatic and curling centers immediately, followed by the Cochrane Arena, staffing and fitness. Now, I understand that this point is in relation to these numbers that I don't understand where it's coming from, but I think we need to be clear that in the funding that we're committing, there is a service level expectation that the pool and the curling rink and the Cochrane Arena remain open. In reduced servicing levels, I can certainly understand, but I'm not prepared to not lock in some servicing commitments. And so I'd look for some advice from staff on how we can link those two, because that does cause me a lot of concern. And I totally understand that a reduction in service levels for sure, but you know, the pool, we've talked about how valuable recreation is to us. You know, the pool, curling, I mean, the old arenas, the home of the generals, these can't be taken off the board entirely without council direction, in my mind.
I think if I may, we're kind of going backwards on a point that is really not relevant. The
Well, no,
560.
but it flagged for me that we haven't locked down a service level in response to.
If you give us an opportunity, Council, I think, again, Ms. Lowe and myself are going to look at the agreement. I think there is a reference in the agreement to the service level expectations in terms of the facility. Again, I think, in fairness to Spray Lakes, with their sort of understanding that there would be a potential further decrease in the operating revenue, they're just saying there are some implications, and I think that's what they just wanted to share with Council. But I appreciate where you're going, Councillor McFadden, with the understanding exactly what any funding that the town commits to and what it would entail and the expectations around that. So we can take a look at the agreement and certainly get back and confirm those details for you.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Padeco?
Quick question, is their budget public information? I would imagine it is, because they're a registered nonprofit. And the reason that I'm asking is because of the fact that the town is technically backhanding them and paying for this with taxpayer dollars. I think it's valuable for the community to see some of these areas. I mean, there is an increase of admin wages and benefits across the board. It's like almost $700,000 from 2017 till now. There are those areas that I question, and I know that we had talked about that freeze of wages, and I'm not seeing it here. Like, those numbers are continuing to go up. So are those new positions? Are they, I feel kind of bad because now we're going to be expected to vote, and I get it. Like, we might not be able to pull everybody over to our end, but I think this is information that should be publicized. And now I feel kind of forced when the information came really late and when I asked for it a long time ago. And now I'm kind of stuck on making a decision. So I mean, I'd almost want to have to defer and have a moment to review the information properly and read over it, so I actually can spend some time looking at the stuff that I've been given now, but if not, then I would like this to be public information so that people can see where exactly their dollars are going to.
2017 was the year the pool opened, and then the year that the all the aquatics staff moved to from the town to the Spray Lakes salary, and then I believe it was a year later that the aquatics manager moved from the town to the Spray Lakes.
Yeah, I mean, 9/11 to 1386,744. I mean, those are big numbers, right?
Yep.
And that's just admin wages and benefits. So I mean, it doesn't include all the other areas, plus their additional expenses. You know, you're talking about over time $800,000. That, like I said, I mean, I'm concerned about where we're going with our own staff and what we're asking them to cut. So, yeah, I'm going to leave my opinion to that for right now.
Councillor Reid?
Yeah, I would say I appreciate the comments. I think everything council was asked for, what information it wanted from Spray Lakes, it was to be directed through Catherine. Catherine got that information and provided it back, so I'm not sure where the gap is. Secondly, it is a nonprofit. It does have public statements as required by the Nonprofit Societies Act, and all these documentation have been made available to you over the last several months. So I'm not sure why this is coming as a bit of a surprise, but it is what it is in terms of recognizing that you're trying to be responsible with the taxpayer dollars. So I appreciate that.
Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, I'm just kind of following up on Councillor Padeco's underscoring of some of the numbers. The pool opened in 2017, so kind of the first full year of the full operation of the facility was 2018. Their total expenditures for compensation at that point was $3.95 million. The next year it jumped up 4.6, nearly $700,000 in 1 year in compensation. And when you look at their CIR files, there was grid jumps for their top 10 positions. So that was 2019, the same year that the recession had hit. We were tightening down our budgets. So that's where my questions are coming from. We're looking at the fact we're in the COVID world right now. So we're looking at budgeting $2 million for operations, which in the COVID world, less people are going to be able to use it than ever before, and we're going to pay more per capita for those people to use it. So it's a hard thing to swallow as a priority for me. Again, the email we got, the letter we got was clearly written with some passion, but my questions have always been about the finances and the concerns around the management. I get one of the comments here is that, you know, you certainly must understand that things, as revenue goes up, so must the expenditures, but I don't agree that the management tiers needed to go up, which the only thing I've been able to see is the CRA reports. So we've been assured that there's been no increases in the last couple of years, which is fine. One of the things I've heard is that the senior level, that top position, also gets compensation in the form of bonuses. So Councillor Reid, is that accurate or not?
Go ahead.
There is a provision in the manager or in Blair's contract for a bonus.
And so I appreciate that there was you said no big adjustments last year, or COLA, a number of other things. Was that also held?
I'd have to check. I don't know for sure.
Anyway, so I'm not trying to I appreciate the work, and it's an amazing facility, and I'm so glad we have it. But to spend, $2 million, which is, even if you said it was up from 1.3 last year, that's a 2% tax rate increase alone to have less people use the facility, which, it's uncomfortable for me. And then in this letter, it's kind of raising the potential for different service levels to be cut. And so my security in voting for their budget would be some commitment to some service levels. I mean, and it's, I don't want to feel, we should all be working together. Like the county, their people recreate, the board, they're volunteers, they have a passion for recreation. This council's a passion for recreation, people love it, but times are tough. We got to make sure that we're getting the service levels that we're prepared to pay for.
Yeah, I've heard the arguments. I appreciate what you're saying, but I think it's time to move on. I think this section 3 had, as Drew indicated, was in response to what they understood to be the discussion yesterday. My understanding is that there's no proposal to close the pool or the arena or the curling clubs with a proposed admin allocation. So, but I'm confident to go back and I'm happy to talk about service level agreements.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of rehashing the same conversation we had before lunch, but unless there's, yeah.
I kind of look at it like any other community partner that comes forward, and I mean, we've had this conversation with the library or a different organization, and a lot of times they are not fully funded. But I do feel that this letter, and because it's public knowledge, is a little threatening. If you don't give me my money, I'm going to do this. I've never heard of the library stating, oh, I'm not getting full funding, so we're gonna get rid of a couple people, or, you know, 100% close shop. Like, I've never heard that, right? So I kind of feel like you're kind of being pushed rather than kind of working with them and trying to understand where we're coming from. Yeah, I have a tough time with this one, because again, we're going to ask residents to pay XYZ percentage of their taxes to this, and then yet it's not free for everybody. So if you want to go use it, you still have to buy a membership to go there. So, and meanwhile, we're going to look at cutting out a bunch of other stuff. So I think we just have to all do the best that we can, but I know I'll be voting for my money to go.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to ask for security on services based on an unknown number that we would be funding. So obviously, in any department that we would have, taking away operational dollars has an effect on services. We've heard that all day yesterday. The second part is that I'm kind of losing my train of thought here, but we've talked about it. We've got the information. It's a matter of moving on or not moving on. I guess I would look at the 5 of us that are willing to move on with this. Is that still the case? So we can leave it on the parking lot. It's still on the bottom of the list if you want to come back to it. But I think we've got 5 out of 7 of us who are willing to move on with it. And if you want to split it out of the budget and vote on it separately like you asked for yesterday, that's well within the right. Councillor McFadden?
I get the point. What I am asking for is that confirm the service level of agreements so that all of council is aware that what the $2 million that's being discussed is going to deliver for us before it's brought to a vote.
Mr. Hyman?
So Ms. Lowe has helped me in locating some of the clauses from the contract. There's nothing in the agreement. You have to understand, when they prepared this agreement, they didn't say something specifically about the pool must be open through the whole thing, but there are some expectations. So I will just read to you a couple of different clauses for council's benefit. Spray Lakes would operate the premises in a commercially reasonable manner in accordance with the following principles: to provide services that are responsive to the changing community needs, to increase accessibility to services for all residents of the town and the county, to continuously improve service delivery, to engage in community consultation regarding services and programs offered at the premises, and to monitor user satisfaction and provide annual performance reports to the community regarding satisfaction, and undertake all activities and provide all services reasonably required for the efficient management, operation, and maintenance of the premises. So there's nothing specifically that speaks to thou shalt have the pool, curling rink, things of that nature. There is under Article 9, users' use and public access. The society shall ensure that residents in the town of Cochrane and Rocky View County are provided with reasonable access to the premises. The society's obligations in this regard include, but are not limited to, ensuring that access and services are available at a reasonable cost to all users of the premises. The premises are made available for public access a minimum of 70 hours per week, and a schedule of public hours and outside rental times is made available to the public at all times. So again, those are the parts of the agreement that I think would reference this. Again, I would, just based on my conversation and dealing with Blair and Aaron at the Spray Lakes, they were very clear that this message in terms of item 3 was specifically if it was going to go to $1.1 million and what they would need to do in order to continue to operate. However, if council were to proceed with administration's recommendation, they're prepared to proceed with the operating the facility.
Okay, and I would just circle back that we have had recent conversations with the board. We had our strategic session. We came to a kind of a understanding that we would continue operating in the future like a department. We have not even had given that a chance to really succeed. I think that within the COVID realm that we're trying to operate in, we've agreed that kind of straw poll-ish so far that we would be willing to move ahead with the 1.7 and the 300,000 for capital. I would suggest that we give 2019 or 2020 that trial, and in the meantime, I'm fully understanding and hearing the concerns from the operating side and the numbers. Let's get that conversation going, and let's give the process a chance to work, where the board comes forward with more information, and we ask for what we want to see, and we get that over the next year. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. I was looking to move on to a few of the other items in the parking lot. I think this is a good discussion. I agree with some of the, I'm glad we're bringing up some of the things. I think we've addressed them, and I have confidence that they'll be addressed going forward. So that's why I've got my eye on a few other things that we can go to the parking lot.
So you're moving us along?
Yeah, if we can, yeah.
Anyone else?
Unless we want to, is there anyone else on the Spray Lakes topic right now?
I don't see any other lights on.
Okay. So, Mr. Mayor made the comment that we haven't found a significant amount of cuts in the 2021 year, and I agree with that, and I don't think it's from lack of trying. I think we were presented with frankly, an excellent budget for 2021. I have a lot of respect for the budget we were handed, and that's why I don't think there's a lot to come out of the 2021 portion of the budget. I've only got a few submissions here. Where we do see significant changes for 2022 and 2023, I see a lot of things we've identified on the parking lot that we have yet to discuss, and I think that's where we'll see our biggest changes. So excited to get to that whenever we do. 2021, the ideas that I'm looking at is I'm looking at our town partners here right now. We've went on with Spray Lake Sports Center because it's, well, we needed to have a good discussion about that. There's a few other things when I go down that list. One for me is the library, where I look at just out of consistency, not because this is a large ticket item. I see our per capita costs increasing year over year there. It's very small amounts, but just to be consistent with what we just did with Spray Lakes, I think we should be maintaining a per capita cost at whatever the 2020 level is, rather than increasing per capita each year there. So that would be one parking lot proposal I would have. Community grants we touched on yesterday. I think we've frozen the appropriate ones already, but it would be maybe worth a look to see if we're comfortable with our increases in community grants one more time. And then coming out of an in-camera session yesterday, we identified some non-core services to talk about possible cuts there and that might affect the 2021 budget, so I wanted to put that on the parking lot as well.
Okay.
If I could add those.
So the only thing that's not written on the board so far was the library, I think. And if we may just start on that one. I had a question about that yesterday, and I think some of the increases we're seeing are to do with the union. Salaries increasing, similar to our own.
Through the chair to the chair, yes, that is correct. Based on some of the union negotiations that they've had, there were some increases.
Okay.
Okay. I'd also add in, that's not a hill to die on for me. I just noticed it as an inconsistency in the way we're approaching things. That's the only reason I really brought it up. I think they deliver a great service, and it's not large dollars that we're talking about either. It was just inconsistencies that I spotted.
Okay. All right, so library is on the board and off the board. Okay. Councillor Flowers?
If I could just speak to the two things that Councillor Wilson brought up. So the library does have to raise because of the union fees, but I know that Jerry's compared it to other communities, and the per capita is still quite low compared to other communities around the province. So I don't think it's really fair to share it with rec and try to compare it. It's more comparable to other libraries, and I think they deserve the raise in the income. Regarding the grants, last night I woke up in the night thinking about the community groups and all the difficulties they're going to have fundraising this year, and I'd really like to take that one off the table if we could. It's not a very large increase. I think Catherine was going to figure it out for us, but it'll make a big difference to us, but it will to the community groups.
Okay, Catherine, did you have that number we requested yesterday?
I do. So if we were to hold all of the community grants at the 2020 level, in 2021 that would be a reduction of $5,337. In 2022, the reduction would be $10,834, and in 23 it would be $16,497.
Okay, so not, to your point, not a lot of change on the tax ledger to help community groups that may need it even more. So you'd like it taken off? Anybody else want to talk about that item? Councillor Federico?
I would agree with Councillor Flowers. I think that, it's just not a big enough number for us to be able to start taking it away. And let's face it, trying to get sponsorship or stuff like that is going to be very, very difficult for a lot of these groups. I did want to kind of clarify, though, I think that we should have something going forward that if we remain in COVID times, just so that we're not kind of faced with another light up scenario, or, if they decide to cancel, what kind of policy do we have around that? Just so that they don't necessarily maybe have to come back to council, but we should have some wording that if something's delayed or had to be put off, that funding still could be released, maybe up to a certain time period or whatever that looks like, or maybe it's up to administration to be able to work through that with the groups so that we're not kind of dragged into that discussion or battle.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like the suggestion to have administration deal with it. We funded it, that the intent fits the original intent, then fund away, right? Okay, so you're keep it as is, Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, I certainly support it. I think there's kind of long-standing research that for investment in nonprofits in the voluntary sector, it's a 10-for-1 return on the dollar, I think. So it's always a good investment, and I think we get much more than we put out when it comes to the community grants, so I fully support it.
Yeah, I agree. Good points. Anyway, so everyone's thumbs up for this one as budgeted? Okay, so Councillor Wilson?
Thumbs up for both. I just wanted to make sure we left no stone unturned, and if we had inconsistencies, we addressed them. So,
yeah. No, and I wasn't hearing you saying that this is a rec versus library. It was just let's look at it under the same lens.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can take, which one? Community grants off. I think yeah, we'll get there. Mr. Weldon, do you have the transit update?
I do. It will take a couple minutes to get the PowerPoint presentation onto the computer.
Okay, I'm just checking to see if you're ready to go when we get there. I'm not surprised that you are. Thank you. Catherine, do you have are you close to having that number handy?
Well, I have a spreadsheet. The challenge is that in 22 and 23, it changes based on what we do in 21.
Right.
So I can do 21 very quickly and confidently, but then we'll have to do some recalculating for 22 and 23. So what I can put up on the board right now is what the dollar amount is of the increase in each of those years, if that gives you some idea. And then I can calculate it and let you know where we're at.
Yeah, I think, yes, I think is the answer.
Okay.
Please?
Yeah. So right now, the dollar tax increase in 2021 is $363, or $363,386. In 2022, $1,268,745, and all of this is net of growth. In 2023, net of growth, $1,797,327.
And then dividing those by 288?
Well, no, because it depends. A 1% will be different in 22 than
Right.
it is in 21.
Oh, okay.
Because
That's
it's
what you
year
were
over
trying
year,
to
right?
explain to me.
That's
All
what I
right.
mean, that it's a moving target.
So 2021, we're at what?
1.27%?
And that's including the reduction of the council
No, I haven't,
remuneration?
I was busy doing this. I have not
Okay.
heard a single thing happening.
So let's just focus on 2021 for now, and then see what shakes for 22 and 23.
And then I can
after.
give an update.
Yeah. Everybody's good with that approach? Yeah. Okay, so far we've removed the council remuneration. Councillor Wilson has put the non-core positions up and what was the other one? The staff benefits, okay. So we'll likely need to go in camera maybe for those two conversations, let's suggest. Do you want to talk, how do you guys want to proceed? Which ones on the list do you want to talk about? Transit? If Mr. Weldon's ready to roll with his update?
Okay, thank you, everyone. So I'd like to start just by, this is going to be a brief update on transit for 2020. Just so council is aware, we will be bringing forward a more detailed overview of COLT at the December 14th council meeting as well. So for 2020, obviously, COLT had to respond to COVID-19. These are the points in which we executed that response. So firstly, adapt to the demand. Now, the demand dropped by 74% at the peak of COVID starting in April, which is pretty significant. But due to the on-demand service, we were able to reduce the number of vehicles on the road to meet this lower demand levels. We also limited and controlled the capacity of the buses, and this also consisted of the enhanced cleaning and limiting the capacity to maintain physical distance, and that was reducing the bus capacity to 6 passengers. We were also able to do contact tracing, and if there was a confirmed case of a rider that was on COLT, we were able to trace who may have come into contact or was on the bus prior to the enhanced cleaning as well. We did offer the service for free. Council made transit free from April to August of this year to support essential service workers and given our operational cost savings as well. And then lastly, the operational savings itself, adapting to the lower demand, we were able to reduce the cost of the operation while still maintaining the service hours. And savings were approximately up to about 50%. So this is the contracted operations cost expected versus the actual for 2020. So expected is a total of $655,402. Colt has a gross cost cap based on our Southland contract hourly rate and base service hours. The actual in 2020 right now, that's year to date, is $521,960. When COVID-19 dropped ridership in mid-March, we adjusted the number of vehicles to match the demand. The total operational savings have been about $133,442. These are just contracted operational costs, which is greater than the total expected revenue for 2020. We are under budget on just operational savings, so fare and advertising revenue and material and goods savings bring us even further under what was planned for the budget for this year. A lot of information on this slide. Just that the total revenue as of October 2020 has been $37,717. Now, cash was the highest grossing fare type, and rather than the online payments, and we will be working towards increasing a switch from paying for the passes in cash to the online payments as an option in 2021. Both operational savings and fare revenue to date brings us to $171,159. This is an update on our monthly ridership. This is from October 2019 to October 2020. As expected, you see a dip in the ridership. This was starting in April. This was obviously at the beginning, or from March into April. This is the start of COVID. And then we see it rebound throughout May, June, and July as the free service came on. And you can see a steady increase as well. And that is from when we implemented the paid service back in August, and we're seeing a steady increase from that time as well. This is a bit more of a granular view, and I not expect you guys to see all the details in that, but you can see the same trend. This goes back to January 6th and to the October 26th here. And ridership is trending upwards. But just to keep in mind that in 2021, again, just given where the numbers are trending, this may start to trend back down if there is a lockdown or any type of increase in our COVID-19 numbers as well. This is just some stats from October 7th from 2019-2020. So passengers, 33,040. Of this, the children, which is 5 years and under, was about 6% at 1,912. Our wheelchair passengers were 195. Bicycles was 165. The total trip duration is 14 minutes versus direct trip. So what this means is that the average trip duration was 14 minutes for Colt. And then when comparing that to if someone could actually hop in their own vehicle and drive themselves, it is 8.6 minutes. So that delta is actually fairly low, which means that it's a pretty great service in terms of timing. And that difference is 5.4 minutes, which is pretty low. The ride rating, so people are able to rate their ride, that averaged out to 4.7 stars out of 5, which is pretty great. The registered users currently were just under 6,000 at 5,994. The on-time performance, so this is our gauge of being on time to pick folks up, is at 96%, which is also extremely high. And then our busiest days that we're finding are Tuesdays and Fridays. And, you know, I'm not sure why, but those are our busiest days. So we have pre-COVID average versus the October 2020 average. The weekday, so the Monday to Friday, the passengers pre-COVID was 171 versus now we're at 127. Saturday passengers, 42 versus 34. And Saturday now, though, is only 6 hours of service compared to the weekdays, which is 14-hour service. Shared ride is 73% versus 70%, and the passengers per vehicle hour, is 4.7 versus 3.5. And just to note that that reduction might be because there's a reduced capacity on the buses due to COVID-19 as well, reducing it to 6. So what's next for Colt? So we are currently working with Southland Transportation on an service agreement to bring to council for the local Colt and regional on-it service integration. The agreement looks at adding 4 peak hour Colt fixed routes, Colt that would connect to the transit hub. The hours being discussed currently are 5:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Given the Colt buses will replace the local trips, the on-it bus currently needs to run. So Southland will be funding for 3 to 4 routes, and on-demand Colt bus will be turned into the 4th fixed route. The Colt bus will connect riders to the transit hub where they can connect across Cochrane or into Calgary using the following on-it regional routes, and that's the 3 a.m. routes and 3 p.m. trips, and maybe a midday trip, and that's from the transit hub to the Brentwood LRT station, which is the University of Calgary. 4 trips, the transit hub to the SAIT in downtown, and 4 trips, the transit hub to the Foothills Hospital in downtown. And then there is a potential for a summer route to Banff that's also being discussed. The fixed routes during peak periods will help meet demand to allow Colt to shift more on-demand buses to the midday and evening service. And due to COVID-19, this service integration has been delayed until the bus capacity and demand is increased and warranted. And thank you. I'd be happy to answer some of your questions. And I'd just like to note, I'd like to thank Mr. LaFlèche for putting this together in such a timely manner. He worked very hard in a very short period of time to put this together. So I just say thank you. Yeah.
I'm sure he did, and he had a huge binder that he was flipping through at the same time. No. Right. Yeah. We also appreciate Devin's efforts to come up with this in such a short time. So thank you for mentioning him. Councillor Reid? Question?
Just a couple. What does shared ride mean? Does that mean more than one person on the?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And the local regional bus, the photograph is not the one. My understanding is that that's not what you're going to be using in terms of the proposal. It'll be a smaller bus.
Not necessarily. It can be the regional bus. What's currently happening is that Colt is providing a regional service into Calgary, and that is utilizing a smaller bus. But with the on-it, it could, when the numbers justify moving back to the more of the touring bus, which is the current on-it, that the on-it touring bus would actually be used as well. Yeah.
So just to pursue that, what I understood was Southland couldn't make a go of it financially because the bus was too big. So we can somehow?
That is correct. Using the touring bus, that was one of the factors that meant that they could no longer provide that services due to the low ridership numbers. Using the smaller bus that is used for Colt, we are able to provide that service. It is not at a cost to the town of Cochrane, and why that is because we have a threshold to cover all of the costs associated with that service. So there's so many monthly passes that need to be purchased in order to reach that break-even point. And if that break-even point is not achieved month over month, then that service would no longer be provided. So there would be no cost to the town of Cochrane, but we're able to provide that service. There's even a potential for some revenue. I'm a little bit reluctant to say that.
We don't want to go there.
Yeah.
Just yet.
Yeah.
So that leads me to the last question, just to be clear then. So I'm glad to clarify that in terms of the revenue and loss. So on page 40, where we have transit, this next step, is that taken into the budget considerations? Because what I'm understanding is that there'll be no additional loss to the town.
Or is it a week? Is it 2 hours? Is it 3 months? I mean, I don't know. But just so that we can give that information back to residents who are having challenges.
Sure, and that's a really good question. I think what we can do is when Mr. LaFlèche comes in December, he'll have that answer for you.
Perfect, thank you. But thank him for all the information.
I will, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Weldon, for the update. Again, for the turnaround, too. It's appreciated. And I'm glad to hear you're coming back in December, and I know it's for a slightly different service, but I think that because this is a new service to the community, relatively new. I mean, it's a year or two now. I can't remember the dates, but maybe we could get an update. I don't want to say quarterly. I don't want to add a bunch of work, but just maybe 3 months or so after December. What would that be? March or so? Maybe spring. We get an update just to keep council in the conversation around on all the good things that are happening with Colt. Maybe we can give some feedback on what we're hearing in the public, and then what we can do to address some of those barriers, if there are any.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea.
Council agree with that as a path forward? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Flowers?
Just curious if you have an update about the car program?
We do, tentatively, and I think more information will be shared in December, but Mr. LaFlèche has been working very closely with FCSS on the car program. I know that in particular, it had been delayed. I know that was something that they would have wished to have been implemented in 2020. But because of the challenges that we've had this year, it has been delayed. But that is something that they are looking to implement into 2021. Using Colt as an option for the car program. Yeah, so that is forthcoming. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, council, we're good on transit? So we can remove it from the board? It was really just an update. I think, Councillor Federico, you were looking for, not really a change in budget? Okay. So now we've really got just personnel discussions to go through, as far as I can tell from here. Anyone have anything non-personnel? Councillor Reid?
I was just curious. I was trying to figure out where or when to ask this question, but I'd like to know, Drew and Catherine respectively, is there anything that you thought we would ask or should have asked and didn't?
No. And I'm serious, giving that thought to your question. I'd like to think that I would have provided the information you needed without you having to ask. So, there isn't anything that I don't think you covered.
Yeah, I would concur, Councillor Reid. I think we did a lot of work to get ready to prepare the budget, not only getting to the draft document, but also preparing for these discussions. And, you know, I commend council. I think you guys have asked a lot of good questions, but there isn't anything that we, you know, didn't anticipate or you have not asked, so.
Yeah. Okay, I would say two things. One is just to echo what the mayor and Councillor Wilson has said. This was probably, maybe I'm just getting tainted in terms of the years on council, but this is probably the best budget package in terms of being able to move forward and the work that you've done that I've been party to. And so thank you for your work. The only reason I asked that question is I just want to be sure that there isn't something that we've missed. And if I understand both of your answers, then there's nothing we've missed. And you anticipated everything. I also think asking the questions in advance, allowing us to do that, was helpful as well. So thank you.
Councillor Flowers, you had one item that you talked about that we should probably discuss now.
We called it
The
Land
utility servicing study for Fifth Avenue?
to look at the Fifth Avenue site underground and do a little preparation so that eventually the Big Hill Lodge can be put there, knowing that it's practical and doable. So I wondered about I think it was $100,000 price tag that you had put on it, if we could add that to the budget for this 2021.
Okay, on that, Councillor Reid?
Yeah, just to say that I'd be supportive of that, recognizing that the, if I understand it, the utility assessment would be for the entire area, not just the space where the Big Hill Lodge would be. And that would then help us get on with the Horse Creek Park move.
That is correct, Councillor Reid. I think that project would benefit a number of other projects, Big Hill Lodge, Horse Creek Sports Park, and the future development of Fifth Avenue. So it checks a lot of the boxes.
Is it just coincidental everything is $100,000 or? I'm kidding.
Question from me on that. Would this generally be consultant work that you could farm out and not, I mean, I know that there would be staff capacity.
There would be a staff resource associated with it, but it would be primarily sourced out. So it wouldn't have necessarily that impact of a project of this nature if we were doing it in-house.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, no, I support the ask. I think Mr. Heineman's kind of really captured all of my thoughts on this, and that it relates to so many things. If we're going to move forward with this Horse Creek Sports Park, these are all dominoes that were identified with that tri-site implementation plan. So not having it in the budget in 21, 22, or 23 means we're, you know, and I think you're bang on, Councillor Flowers, that if we have this in there, the town is not being the barrier. If, say, the province were to come forward with funding for the Big Hill Lodge, we would have all our ducks in a row on the site to allow them to move forward. That's your intent? Yeah? Okay. Councillor Federico?
I only have one question. This kind of comes from Councillor Reid's comment earlier about the budget. I know we're mandated to have a 3-year budget cycle, but do all 3 years need to be made available as public knowledge? They do, okay. Yeah, it makes it difficult, obviously, when we see some of how that communications goes out with some of those numbers. So maybe if there's a way in future years to try to work so that it sounds a little bit different, so that we don't have like a mass exodus of the public all freaking out when we haven't even, I mean, we got messages, I'm sure we hadn't even left chambers yet, and they were already flooding into our inbox. So that communications piece is extremely important of how we put that back out. And the only other thing that I request is maybe some more detail into how many people are in departments, but I think we touched on that yesterday a little bit, just so that we know how many bodies are affected or whatever.
Thank you, Councillor Federico. I think those are good comments. One of the things we pride ourselves on is learning from our experiences, and we understand council administration based on the document that, again, we prepared to start the discussion. It is a process. That's why I said at the beginning, we trust the process. I understand that there were a number of people concerned, particularly when the newspaper reported that it's 11% increase in 3 years. We'll learn from that experience and look at how communication goes forward in the future. But again, as I said, I'm very proud of the team effort that brought this forward, because there's a lot of people in this room that had part of that, but there's also a great deal of a number of people who aren't here who were critical to getting this prepared. So.
Councillor Wilson?
I don't feel strongly about my position on this, and I'm probably outvoted anyway, but I wouldn't be in support of doing this in 2021 only. I would leave it off totally, but I would guess if I'm still sitting in the seat next year, if things have clarified or future projections have clarified, we know what kind of economy and world we're living in, I would be almost certain to vote for it at that point. Right now, I don't think it's the appropriate time to do it this year, though.
Sorry.
Although I do definitely see the importance of it and the reason for it, so it's a soft no from this side.
Okay, you're looking at it from the perspective of the timing?
The timing and the unpredictability of what the future is about to throw at us. I would like to see what happens the rest of this year and the start of next, and then I'd have a better idea, I think. That's my only hesitation, not that it's not an important piece. And I've said no to almost everything coming into the 2021 cycle for that reason, where I go, I'd like to see more of what's about to hit us.
No, you bring up a good point, and administration obviously left it out for a reason. Maybe could we ask the question around the dominoes? So working backwards from the Horse Creek Sports Park. So if we could just give us maybe a timeline of how those dominoes fall, and is 2021 the correct year to have that study done? I mean, I know you can't have it done too soon, but would it be on the shelf for 2 years is where I think what I'm hearing.
Well, I think there's a number of things. There were the discussions with the Minister of Seniors Housing earlier this year, Big Hill Lodge in particular, and the interest in relocating to the Fifth Avenue bench. Obviously, for that to happen, even putting financing aside, you have to have done the assessment and understand the servicing for that site. So I think that's one key component to this. And when we had that discussion with Minister Pon, there was very much a let's look at future years and have this discussion, because they think we have a very good site. So I think that's something to definitely consider. And then when you talk about Horse Creek, there are the two baseball diamonds off the Fifth Avenue site. So if Big Hill Lodge was to move, we need to move those to Horse Creek. We would be reviewing in 2021, doing the plan. I know Minor Ball has been in touch with us quite a bit, and they're interested in having dedicated fields, given the expansion and interest in their sport. So getting an opportunity to get those fields up and going in the Horse Creek Sports Park. We also have a opportunity with Interpipe, which we're currently working on, and we should have some more information in the new year, which would have some funding opportunities. So those are some of the things. And then this also talks about Fifth Avenue itself. It's not only the seniors. There's a number of different other projects that we would have a clear line of sight in terms of the future development of those. So I think there is some benefit in doing this work. It really puts us in the starting gate to be able to make some decisions for future projects.
So I'm hearing sooner rather than later, if we're doing it at all. I pride myself on the Reader's Digest version.
And
Councillor Flowers?
Just to add to that, I think Rocky View Foundation will be looking for some sort of confirmation that they can build there, because they can't do any design work or fundraising or anything until they have confirmation, which we can't really give them until we've done that assessment, is what I understand. So I just don't want it to be a barrier for anybody moving forward.
Okay. Is it on there? Yes? I can't see that far still. It's on my list here. Oh, it's on the other side. Oh, it's like through 16 pieces of glass. Okay. Before we move on, I just thought, and this is not to say that we should land in one area or another, but I thought I've been kind of doing this over the years, giving a brief synopsis of where other communities draft, what other communities' administrations have been proposing as a draft budget to their council. So I met with mid-sized cities last week and put this on the agenda to just have a round table around where other communities are landing. Cochrane, I could go through the list if you want, but yeah, okay. St. Albert was 1.1, Lloydminster was 3, Fort Saskatchewan 0.5, Spruce Grove 1, Grand Prairie 1.5, Okotoks I believe was 1. It was hard to keep up with everybody. Stony Plain 1.71. Airdrie was 2, Lacombe 0.8, I believe that's approved already, and Beaumont 1.5, so our administration is basically right in the middle of all of those. So that's really what and that wasn't all, everybody wasn't at the meeting, but that was the gist of the conversation. Just give you an idea of where we're landing in regards to relation to everybody else. So I think really all we have left is the in-camera items, unless anyone has anything else. No, you need a motion to go in camera. Councillor Flowers, all those in favor? That's carried. Maybe we'll take a bio break to Okay, we're back. Still Tuesday. Budget 2021 deliberations continue. Council had a brief in-camera session. We had a break. And now we have completed going through the entire draft budget document, including service fees, projects and capital, and the operating budget as proposed by administration. And I just would, at this point, again, I think all of council has shared this with administration throughout the last couple of days, but I'll stop here at this time and say thank you again for all the work that's gone into this document. As we have proceeded through, I think we're finding as much difficulty in this budget year as you did. And just the work that has gone into this is appreciated, so thank you. I'm sure everybody will echo that as we discuss. So we have a list of things that we had in our parking lot that we wish to talk about now that will affect potentially the overall draft that will, if I'm correct, we are voting in principle today on these certain items to be included, and then at the end of this discussion we'll have an approximate but close potential percentage increase, if any, in the 2021, 2022, 2023 financial fiscal years. And then the budget in its entirety will come back on December 14th for real approval.
You're correct, yes.
Wow. That's one in a row. Okay, so I'm reading off my phone, so I'm not texting anyone at home. It's a list of the things that we had talked about throughout the couple of days that we wish to highlight or talk about and vote on. So first one, and they're in no particular order. First one, the council remuneration remain at 2020 levels for 2021. So that means that there would be a 0 increase to council pay. Everybody's understanding that one? So voting in favor of this means it's being removed from the draft budget. Okay? So all those in favor of that one? Do we need a motion to do that? We don't? Okay, we're good. We've suspended those rules. Okay, so that's the first one, and that is a roughly $27,000 difference to the budget. Sorry, Councillor Flowers?
Does that carry through the next 2 years as well, or is it just for the 1 year?
Just the 1 year, I believe. Yeah. The next one on the item is the Spray Lake Sawmill Family Sports Center funding. And that we've discussed this to be, and the discussion we've had over the last couple of days has landed us on a, as presented in 2021, the draft budget had 1.7 million for the operating side of the rec center and 300,000 for capital. Council's direction was to leave that the same throughout the entire 3-year plan. So voting in favor of this particular item means we're leaving the funding at 1.7, capital at 300 for 2021, 2022, 2023. Everybody's understands that one? Any discussion? No? Okay, all those in favor of that motion? Okay, that carries. Well, not motion, direction, I guess. Number 3, that staffing cost adjustments be implemented. Everybody's aware of this one. This is a reduction in finances to staff costing. Okay? All those in favor of that item? Those opposed? Okay. That one carries. That benefit calculation methodology be amended to reflect accurate percentage of single and family actuals. So this is a change to benefit package that would not see a change, significant change to benefits to staff potentially, or?
Do you want me to step in?
Yes, please.
It's
Good
no
use of a
change.
button over there.
It's no change to the
No
benefit.
change, yeah.
It's no change to who pays for what. Simply, when we calculate the benefit costs, we calculate it on the worst-case scenario, not that people are worse.
Yep.
But the cost for family coverage is higher than the cost for single coverage, and we're never certain if the person in the position will need single coverage or family coverage, so we budget that everybody has family coverage. However, in reality, not everybody does have family coverage, so this would be a change in how we do that calculation so that we don't assume everybody has family coverage.
So staff will see no change in their benefits.
Correct.
It's just how we're calculating the number that we're financing for the year.
That's correct.
Okay. Everybody's cool with that one? Okay. All those in favor of that change? That one carries. This one is that an additional RCMP member included in 2022 be postponed to 2023 to align with the completion of the new protective services building. So originally, the draft budget had that in. We are suggesting it be taken out and postponed to 2023. Everybody's clear on that? All those in favor of that change? Okay, that carries. The last one is that administration be directed to pursue a letter of understanding with the IAFF Local 4819 and Teamsters Local 987 unions to discuss the potential reduction with the respective to the 2% bargained increases in 2021. Everybody's clear on that? Yep, okay. All those in favor of that change? And that is the budget in a nutshell. And those are the changes that we had one. Oh, the capital, sorry. Yes, there is another item. That the Fifth Avenue utility servicing study be added to the capital projects to be funded from operating reserves. So that means that Fifth Avenue utilities we talked about earlier, no effect on the tax rate, it's a reserve draw. Everybody's clear on that? Councillor Flowers, you have a...
Just to speak to it in public, it's an effort to get the tri-site things under motion and things happening there. And if the Big Hill Lodge wants to move there, then this barrier would be taken away from them being able to move there. So it's just a first step. And like you say, it doesn't affect the taxes this year.
Yeah. Okay, everybody's clear on that? All those in favor of that move? Those opposed? Okay, that carries as well. And that, I believe, is a wrap on
I
parking lot
can
items.
provide you that percentage if you care.
Yes,
Mayor Chan.
we would love to have how that breaks down in the budget.
Okay, so at the end of the day, after all of council's adjustments to the tax increase, net of growth, we're now looking at 0.03, which is essentially zero in 2021, rather than the 1.27 that we had in there before. 2022 is now at 1.55 compared to the 4.29 that was in there before. In 2023, it's now at 2.78 compared to the 5.71 that was in the draft budget.
Okay, thank you for that. And of course, those numbers could shift slightly to
This is
December
us
14th.
calculating stuff on the fly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as we stick it into our software, especially the salary, and the benefit calculation, will that be exactly the number that we have in this? There might be some slight
Yeah.
changes, but,
Up or down, plus
Yeah.
or minus?
yeah, but not materially.
No. I just want, it's not written in stone just yet until the 14th.
That's correct.
Yeah. And, I mean, not to, shut down any debate, but obviously December 14th, we can talk about each item, split items out if we want, debate the entire package as it relates to the overall budget for the year. Any further comments from anyone? Councillor Federico?
Just thanks to everybody around the table. There's some hard conversations and some long conversations, but I think respectfully, we probably all heard each other, maybe sometimes not always well, but, just thank you for all your hard work. It's a tough year this year, and I'm pretty sure there are probably many times some of us might have shed a tear or close to it, so, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, thank you for that. It is difficult making decisions that affect, not just residents, but staff, and it's a difficult position to be in as an elected official, and very hard on sleep for a lot of these days. So, Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo those comments and, thank our staff team and my colleagues for working through this. And this is, without a doubt, the most difficult budget I've ever had to work through. Usually, when you're looking at a budget, it's an opportunity for the community to live its dreams, to kind of take the next step forward in building out a vision. Whereas this budget is, reflecting the COVID reality, and it was more about a crisis management budget than really being able to advance our community to the next step. So it was really tough that way for sure. But I think we've really made a point of respecting the taxpayers' needs. And I think, as I said earlier, we don't have really impact on how the federal government impacts you, or the provincial government impacts you, or on COVID impacts you, or your job impacts you, but we can impact what your municipal tax bill looks like. And I think we made the right decisions to make that as easy as possible for the people of Cochrane. But thanks to the team that made it possible.
Councillor Nagel?
In closing, I'd just like to also add my thanks as well. When we first started talking about COVID's impacts on our finances, I think in the spring and summer, I had these fears that we were going to be talking like double-digit tax increases this year, and I think we've all made a lot of tough decisions. You guys have done some really great calculating and finding of efficiencies and innovating, and we've put together a really responsible budget, and I'm pretty proud of where it's at right now.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nagel. Okay, well, there's plenty of opportunity to talk on the 14th about it too, so just thanks again, everyone. I think we got through all of it today, did we not? Yeah, so those of you following at home, no need to tune in tomorrow. That budget 2021 is in the books. Maybe that wasn't clear. We're not meeting tomorrow. So budget 2021 terminated.